The abandoned tractor sat rusting in the field as Marcus Harrington unrolled his blueprints across the wooden table. The woman across from him studied them with piercing eyes, her finger tracing the innovative irrigation system he'd designed. She smiled a knowing smile that would soon change everything. 3 weeks later, when 5 black SUVs rolled onto his failing property and she stepped out in designer boots, Marcus realized his simple act of sharing had altered the trajectory of his life forever. Within months, what was once a struggling farm became the cornerstone of a revolution that would eventually feed thousands. Before we carry on, please hit the subscribe button to make my day and let me know where you are watching from in the comments. The early morning mist hung low over Marcus Harrington's 40 acres, clinging to the stalks of corn that had grown only half as tall as they should have by mid-June. Dew dampened his worn work boots as he trudged through the field, clipboard in hand, tallying another disappointing yield projection. At 43, the creases around his eyes had deepened, carved by years of squinting at the horizon and hoping for rain that either never came or arrived in destructive torrents. "Damn climate," he muttered, making another note on his clipboard. The farm had been in the Harrington family for 4 generations, and it might very well end with him. 3 consecutive years of unpredictable weather patterns had devastated his crops. Last year's drought had given way to this year's excessive spring rains, drowning seeds before they could establish strong roots. His bank account was as depleted as the soil. Marcus pushed his faded blue cap back on his head and gazed across the struggling cornfield to the farmhouse in the distance. The white paint was peeling, and the roof needed repairs he couldn't afford. His daughter, Lily, would be home from college next week for summer break. She'd chosen agricultural science as her major, convinced she could help save the family legacy. Marcus didn't have the heart to tell her there might not be a legacy to save by the time she graduated. He pulled his phone from his pocket and checked the weather app again. Clear skies predicted for the next week too. Clear. The surviving corn needed water, but his irrigation system, an outdated network of pipes and pumps, wasn't keeping up with the increasingly erratic climate. As Marcus headed back toward the barn, he felt the familiar weight of anxiety settling on his shoulders. The bank had granted him an extension on his loan, but it came with a higher interest rate he could barely manage. If things didn't turn around soon, he'd have to consider selling some acreage, an option that felt like betraying his ancestors who had worked this land through the Great Depression, through wars and previous droughts. The barn, at least, remained solid a testament to his grandfather's craftsmanship. Inside, Marcus flipped on the lights and approached the drafting table he'd set up in the corner. Unlike his father, who had been resistant to change, Marcus had always been interested in innovation. His desk was covered with sketches and design ideas for a more sustainable farm operation that he'd never had the capital to implement. He ran his fingers over his latest Deepening greenhouse system that incorporated rainwater collection and solar heating. It was far more advanced than anything in the county, drawing inspiration from articles he'd read online and modified to suit the specific conditions of his land. If he could build even a prototype, he might be able to extend his growing season and diversify his crops, creating a more resilient operation. But prototypes required money he didn't have. Marcus sighed and rolled up the blueprints. Lily had always encouraged him to share his ideas, to seek out grants or investors, but pride had held him back. Harrington solved their own problems. That's what his father had drilled into him. Asking for help was a sign of weakness. The sound of tires on gravel drew his attention. Marcus wasn't expecting visitors, and door-to-door salespeople rarely made it this far down the long country road. He stepped out of the barn and shielded his eyes against the morning sun. A sleek silver hybrid car had pulled up beside his rusted pickup truck, looking as out of place as a spaceship in a cornfield. The driver's door opened, and a woman emerged. She was tall and slender, dressed in what appeared to be hiking pants and a simple white button-down shirt rolled up at the sleeves. Her dark hair was pulled back in a practical ponytail, and large sunglasses obscured her eyes. Despite the casual attire, there was something distinctly polished about her presence. Marcus approached cautiously. "Can I help you?" The woman removed her sunglasses, revealing intelligent brown eyes that evaluated him quickly. "I hope so," she said, extending her hand. "I'm Alexandra Chen, I appear to be a bit lost. I was heading to Riverdale for a meeting, but my GPS directed me down this road, and then lost signal. Marcus shook her hand. Her grip was firm, her palm slightly kalosnot, the soft hand of someone who spent all day behind a desk. Marcus Harrington. Riverdale's about 15 miles north. You'll need to backtrack to the main highway. He pointed down the gravel road. GPS signals get spotty out here. Alexandra nodded, looking past him to survey the farm. This is your land? 4 generations. Marcus replied with a hint of pride that persisted despite his current struggles. She walked a few steps toward the cornfield, studying the plants with a critical eye. Struggling with the weather patterns? Marcus stiffened slightly. There was something knowing in her assessment, something that went beyond casual observation. Who isn't these days? Alexandra turned back to him with a slight smile. I work in sustainable design. Climate adaptation is kind of my thing. She gestured toward the barn. Do you mind if I use your restroom before I head back? It's a long drive to town. Marcus hesitated only briefly before his Midwestern hospitality kicked in. Sure. There's one in the barn. It's not fancy, but it's clean. Perfect. Thank you. As she followed him toward the barn, she added, Beautiful property, by the way. Great bones. Marcus wasn't sure what to make of that comment. The farm had seen better days, and they both knew it. But there was sincerity in her voice that suggested she saw something he didn't. Inside the barn, Marcus directed her to the small bathroom in the corner while trying to subtly tidy the space. He hadn't been expecting company, and tools and papers were scattered everywhere. By the time Alexandra emerged from the bathroom, he had managed to clear a path through the chaos, but his drafting table remained a mess of blueprints and notes. Sorry about the clutter, he said, gathering some papers. Alexandra's attention had already fixed on the drafted greenhouse design visible on his table. Did you draw these? She asked, approaching the table slowly, as if drawn by magnetic force. Marcus felt suddenly self-conscious. His designs were amateur at best, drawn with care, but without formal training. Just some ideas, nothing serious. May I? She asked, her hand hovering over the blueprint. Against his better judgment, Marcus nodded. There was something about her focused interest that made refusal seem impossible. Alexandra carefully unrolled the greenhouse blueprints, studying them with an intensity that made Marcus uncomfortable. Her fingers traced the lines of his irrigation system, paused over his notes about solar positioning, lingered on his calculations for optimal growing conditions. This is fascinating, she murmured, almost to herself. You've incorporated passive solar heating with a gravity-fed irrigation system. She looked up at him, eyes bright with interest. And these adaptations for extreme weather events, they're quite innovative. Marcus shifted his weight from one foot to the other. Like I said, just ideas. I don't have the money to build anything like that. But you've thought about every detail, she persisted, turning her attention back to the blueprints. The orientation relative to the sun path, the thermal mass storage, the backup systems. She looked up at him again. Mr. Harrington, these are just ideas. This is problem-solving at its finest. Her praise felt both good and unsettling. Marcus wasn't used to anyone showing interest in his designs, let alone someone who clearly understood the technical aspects. It's just a hobby, he said, downplaying her enthusiasm. Something to keep the mind busy when the farming gets tough. Alexandra continued examining the blueprints. Do you have other designs? Before he could stop himself, Marcus found himself pulling out more rolled papers from a storage tube beside the drafting table. I've been working on a few different concepts, he admitted, spreading out a design for a rainwater collection system, integrated with crop rotation planning. For the next 30 minutes, Marcus forgot his initial wariness as Alexandra asked insightful questions about his designs. She understood the technical language, challenged some of his assumptions with respectful curiosity, and offered perspectives he hadn't considered. It was the most intellectually stimulating conversation he'd had in years. You know, Alexandra said finally, checking her watch, I really should get going to my meeting. She handed him back the last blueprint reluctantly. Thank you for sharing these with me. You have a remarkable mind, Mr. Harrington. Marcus, he corrected, feeling an unexpected connection to this stranger who saw value in his ideas. "And thank you for the kind words, but ideas don't pay the bills." Alexandra reached into her pocket and pulled out a business card, placing it on top of his blueprints. "Ideas are exactly what pay the bills in my world," she said with a small smile. "If you ever decide you want to do more with these designs, give me a call." Marcus picked up the card. It was minimalist in design, featuring only her name, a phone number, and the company name, Eco Vision Designs. No title, no address. "I'll think about it," he said, though they both knew he probably wouldn't call. Pride was a hard habit to break. Alexandra replaced her sunglasses and thanked him again for the directions and bathroom break. As Marcus watched her drive away, he felt a strange mix of emotions: pride that a stranger had validated his ideas, regret that his financial situation prevented him from pursuing them, and a nagging breath, curiosity about who Alexandra Chen really was. He slipped her business card into his pocket and returned to the daily tasks of managing a failing farm, pushing the encounter to the back of his mind as he focused on more immediate concerns. But that night, as he sat at his kitchen table reviewing his dwindling finances, he found himself taking out her card again, turning it over in his fingers, wondering about roads not taken. The next 3 weeks proceeded with the grinding routine Marcus had grown accustomed to: early mornings checking the fields, afternoons fixing equipment that should have been replaced years ago, evenings poring over financial statements that never improved. Lily had arrived home from college, bringing energy and optimism to the old farmhouse, but also heightening Marcus's sense of responsibility and anxiety about the future. They'd argued the night before about the farm's future. Lily wanted him to apply for sustainable agriculture grants, to reach out to university extension programs, to consider partnerships that might bring in additional revenue. Marcus had resisted, clinging to his independence even as it slipped through his fingers like dry soil. "Pride won't save this farm, Dad," Lily had said, her words striking deeper than she probably realized. Now, as Marcus drove the tractor down the east field, he couldn't shake the feeling that she might be right. The corn was struggling despite his best efforts, and the weather forecast predicted another 2 weeks without significant rain. Without an adequate irrigation system, he'd lose at least half the crop. The sound of vehicles on the gravel road caught his attention. Rarely did anyone come this way unless they were lost, like Alexandra Chen had been 3 weeks ago. Marcus cut the tractor engine and watched as not one but 5 black SUVs made their way up his long driveway, kicking up dust clouds in their wake. His first thought was that it must be government officials perhaps. The bank had run out of patience, or maybe the EPA was conducting some kind of environmental assessment. Either way, it couldn't be good news. Marcus climbed down from the tractor and walked toward the house where the vehicles had parked in a neat row. The doors of the lead SUV opened, and out stepped Alexandra Chen, looking very different from when he'd last seen her. Gone were the hiking pants and casual shirt, replaced by a crisp charcoal suit that screamed professional authority. Her hair was styled elegantly, and she wore minimal but perfect makeup. She looked like she had just stepped out of a corporate boardroom, rather than a car in rural farmland. From the other vehicles emerged an assortment of people carrying equipment: cameras, measuring tools, tablets, and items Marcus couldn't identify. They moved with coordinated efficiency, clearly operating under some predetermined plan. Alexandra spotted him and walked over, her smile both friendly and somehow different than before, more assured, more purposeful. "Hello, Marcus," she said, extending her hand. "I hope you don't mind the surprise visit." Marcus shook her hand automatically, too confused to do anything else. "What's going on?" he asked, watching over her shoulder as the team began to disperse across his property, taking measurements and photographs. "I have a proposition for you," Alexandra said. "But first, I owe you an explanation." She gestured toward the farmhouse porch. "Do you have a few minutes to talk?" Still bewildered, Marcus nodded and led her to the porch. Lily appeared in the doorway, her expression questioning. "Dad? What's happening?" "Lily, this is Alexandra Chen. She's—" Marcus realized he didn't actually know who she was beyond a name and a vague connection to sustainable design. Alexandra filled the gap smoothly. "I'm the founder and lead architect of Eco Vision Designs. We specialize in sustainable architecture and agricultural systems. She reached out to shake Lily's hand. Your father and I met briefly a few weeks ago, and he was kind enough to show me some remarkable designs he's been working on. Lily's eyes widened, and she shot her father a look that was equal parts surprise and vindication. Really? He showed you his blueprints? He did, Alexandra confirmed. And they're the reason I'm here today. She turned back to Marcus. What I didn't tell you during our first meeting is that I was in the area specifically looking for potential partnership sites. Your farm has exactly the characteristics we need for our next major project. Marcus frowned. What project? Alexandra took a deep breath. Mr. Harrington, I'm not just a designer. My company builds demonstration sites for sustainable agricultural systems around the world. We're funded by a consortium of environmental organizations, tech companies, and government grants. Our mission is to create working models of climate-resilient farming that can be replicated in similar regions. End quote. She gestured toward the team now busy surveying his property. We've been searching for a partner farm in this region for our next major installation. When I saw your blueprints designs that independently arrived at many of the same solutions our team has been developing, I knew this was the right place. Marcus felt like the ground beneath him had shifted. You want to use my farm for some kind of demonstration? I want to partner with you, Alexandra corrected. Your designs, combined with our resources and technical expertise, we would fund the full implementation of a comprehensive sustainable farming system, starting with that greenhouse design you showed me, but eventually incorporating all 40 acres. Lily stepped forward, her eyes shining with excitement. Are you serious? That would be amazing. Marcus held up a hand, more cautious. What's the catch? Do you want to buy the land? Take control of operations? Alexandra shook her head. We don't want to own your farm. This would be a true partnership. You would maintain ownership and operational control. We provide the capital investment, technical support, and publicity. In return, the farm becomes a working demonstration site. Farmers, students, and officials could visit to learn about sustainable practices. We document the transformation and share the results globally. And if it fails? Marcus asked, the farmer's instinctive pessimism surfacing. It won't, Alexandra said with quiet confidence. But if any component doesn't perform as expected, we adjust. That's part of the demonstration value, showing how systems can adapt to challenges. We're not looking for perfect, we're looking for resilient and replicable. And Lily could barely contain herself. Dad, this is exactly what we've been talking about. This could save the farm and make a difference for others. Marcus looked from his daughter's hopeful face to Alexandra's composed one. Why me? There must be larger operations, farms that aren't struggling, owners with better credentials. Alexandra's expression softened. When I saw your blueprints, I recognized something rare: innovative thinking rooted in generations of practical experience. You designed solutions specific to this land, this climate, these challenges. That's exactly the kind of partnership we're looking for. Not someone who'll simply follow our instructions, but someone who'll collaborate and contribute their own expertise. She handed him a folder that had been tucked under her arm. This contains our formal proposal, including financial details, timeline, and legal framework. Take your time to review it. Have your lawyer look it over. Ask questions. We want you to be comfortable with every aspect before moving forward. Marcus accepted the folder, still suspicious that there must be a catch somewhere. And if I say no, then we thank you for your time and continue our search, Alexandra replied simply. But I hope you'll consider saying yes. What you've designed deserves to be built, Marcus. And this farm deserves a future. The weight of the moment wasn't lost on Marcus. 3 weeks ago, he'd been calculating how many more months he could hold out before being forced to sell. Now, a potential lifeline had appeared out of nowhere, delivered by a woman who had seemingly gotten lost on his property by chance. Did you really get lost that day? He asked, suddenly connecting the dots. Alexandra's smile turned slightly sheepish. Not entirely. We'd identified your farm as a potential site based on satellite imagery and local agricultural data. I wanted to see it firsthand, without the formality of a business meeting. Getting to see your designs was an unexpected bonus, one that confirmed this was the right place." End quote. Marcus wasn't sure whether to be angry at the deception or impressed by the strategy. Before he could decide, Lily spoke up. "Can I show Ms. Chen around the property, Dad? I can point out the areas where the soil's been most affected by the changing weather patterns." Alexandra looked to Marcus for permission. Despite his lingering wariness, he nodded. As the two women walked toward the fields, he sank into the porch chair, opened the folder, and began to read. The proposal was comprehensive, detailing a 3-year plan to transform Harrington Farm into what they called a climate-adaptive agricultural system. Phase 1 would begin with the construction of his greenhouse design, enhanced with technologies he'd only read about: advanced solar collection, automated environmental controls, water purification systems that would allow for fish farming in conjunction with plant cultivation. Phase 2 would implement regenerative soil practices across 20 acres, incorporating biochar, cover cropping, and integrated pest management systems. Phase 3 would address energy independence through a combination of solar, small-scale wind, and biomass conversion. The financial section made Marcus's head spin. The total investment from Ecovision and their partners would exceed $2 million over 3 years. Marcus would retain full ownership of all installations on his property. His contribution would be the land use rights for demonstration purposes and his active participation in the design and implementation process. There was a modest salary included for him as the site manager and design collaborator, plus profit sharing from any agricultural products sold. After 5 years, all obligations to allow public access would end, though Marcus could choose to continue the partnership. It seemed too good to be true. Marcus flipped through page after page, looking for the hidden trap, the clause that would eventually cost him his land or autonomy. But the contract was surprisingly straightforward, with provisions that actually protected his interests if the project didn't proceed as planned. By the time Lily and Alexandra returned from their tour, Marcus had read the entire proposal twice. His initial skepticism had given way to cautious hope, tempered by years of farming experience that had taught him nothing comes easily. "Your daughter has an impressive understanding of agricultural science," Alexandra said as they rejoined him on the porch. "She gave me insights about your soil composition that will be valuable for our planning." Lily beamed at the praise, then looked anxiously at her father. "What do you think, Dad, about the proposal?" Marcus closed the folder deliberately. "I think it's worth discussing further." It wasn't a yes, but it wasn't a no either for Marcus Harrington. That was significant progress. Alexandra seemed to understand the magnitude of this concession. "Excellent. Perhaps we could meet again tomorrow after you've had more time to review the details. I can bring our head engineer to answer any technical questions." Marcus nodded. "Tomorrow works. And I'd like to know more about the other demonstration sites you've built. See some evidence that these systems actually function in the real world, not just on paper." "Of course," Alexandra said. "I'll bring documentation of our previous projects. And if you're interested, we could arrange for you to speak directly with farmers we've partnered with in similar climate zones." As they finalized plans for the next day's meeting, the survey team began packing up their equipment, having completed their initial assessment of the property. Marcus watched them with a mix of emotions: hope, suspicion, pride, and fear, all churning together in his chest. When Alexandra and her team finally departed, leaving behind only the folder and a head full of possibilities, Lily threw her arms around her father. "This could be it, Dad. The turning point we've been hoping for." Marcus returned her hug but tempered her enthusiasm. "We don't know that yet, Lo. It could still fall through, or there could be complications they're not telling us about." Lily pulled back, studying his face. "But you're considering it? Really considering it?" Marcus looked out over his struggling fields, then down at the folder in his hands. "Yes," he admitted. "I'm really considering it." That night, Marcus couldn't sleep. He sat at his drafting table in the barn, spreading out his greenhouse designs alongside the technical specifications included in Alexandra's proposal. Her team had taken his basic concept and elevated it with technologies he'd only dreamed of incorporating. They hadn't changed the fundamental design, they'd enhanced it, respected it, built upon it. The realization slowly dawned on him that this might actually be the genuine partnership Alexandra had described, not the corporate takeover he'd initially feared. For the first time in years, Marcus allowed himself to imagine a thriving future for Harrington Farm 1, where innovation and tradition worked together, instead of at odds. By morning, he had filled a notebook with questions, ideas, and modifications to propose. When Alexandra returned with her engineer, Marcus was ready not just to listen, but to contribute. The meeting stretched from a planned hour to nearly 4 as they delved into technical details, agricultural strategies, and implementation timelines. By the end of the week, Marcus had spoken with 3 other farmers who had partnered with EcoVision in different parts of the country. Their experiences weren't perfect there, had been challenges, adjustments, occasional tensions, but all 3 reported significant improvements in their farm's resilience and profitability. Most tellingly, none regretted the partnership. 10 days after Alexandra's surprise visit, Marcus signed the contract. Within a week, the first construction equipment arrived to break ground on what would become the centerpiece of the project. His greenhouse design, now named the Harrington Integrated Growing System in the official BIA documentation. The transformation of Harrington Farm had begun, and with it, a transformation in Marcus himself. The man who had resisted change now found himself at the center of an agricultural revolution. His hand-drawn blueprints becoming the foundation for a system that might one day help thousands of struggling farmers adapt to an uncertain climate future. As the first steel beams of the greenhouse rose against the sky, Marcus stood beside Alexandra, watching the physical manifestation of his ideas take shape. "Did you ever imagine this?" she asked quietly. Marcus shook his head. "Never thought I'd see it built in my lifetime." He paused, then added with newfound conviction, "But I'm sure glad I am." The summer sun beat down on the construction site, where Marcus Harrington's greenhouse design was rapidly taking physical form. What had once been mere lines on paper was now a complex framework of steel, glass, and technology rising from the earth like a monument to possibility. Workers moved with practiced efficiency, transforming theoretical concepts into tangible reality under the watchful eyes of EcoVision's project managers. Marcus stood at the edge of the site, hard hat in hand, still struggling to believe that his ideas were being taken so seriously. Beside him, Sophia Chen pointed to the eastern section of the structure where specialized glass panels were being installed. "These photovoltaic glass sections will generate electricity while allowing specific light wavelengths through for optimal plant growth," she explained. "Your original design called for standard solar panels adjacent to the greenhouse, but this integration gives us dual functionality without sacrificing growing space." Marcus nodded, impressed by the elegant solution. "And the excess electricity?" "Stored in those." Alexandra gestured toward a row of sleek battery units being positioned nearby. "Enough capacity to power essential systems for up to 3 days without sun. Once the wind turbines are installed next month, you'll have redundant power generation." The scale of the project continued to astonish Marcus. What had begun as a modest greenhouse concept had expanded into a comprehensive system that would eventually transform all 40 acres of his struggling farm. The projected timeline spread over 3 years, but the core components of the greenhouse and initial field modifications were being fast-tracked for completion before winter. "Mr. Harrington," a young man in an EcoVision polo shirt approached, tablet in hand. "We need your input on the irrigation control placement. The engineer wants to know if you prefer the main interface in the greenhouse or in the equipment shed." This had become a common occurrence over the past weeks, team members seeking Marcus's opinion, treating him not as a bystander, but as an essential collaborator whose practical knowledge was valued. Initially uncomfortable with this attention, Marcus had gradually embraced his role, finding that his generations of farming experience complemented the technical expertise of Alexandra's team. "Let's put it in the greenhouse," Marcus decided after brief consideration. "I'll be spending more time there during cold months, and being able to adjust things without going outside makes sense." As the young man hurried off to relay this decision, Alexandra smiled. "You're getting good at this." "At what?" "Making decisions that balance practicality with innovation." She surveyed the construction site with evident satisfaction. "Some of our partners struggle with that balance. They either resist every technological suggestion or want to implement things that look impressive but create maintenance nightmares." Marcus shrugged. "I'm Just thinking about what will make sense 6 months from now when all you fancy architects and engineers have moved on to your next project and I'm the one managing this system day to day. That's precisely why this partnership works, Alexandra replied. And speaking of partnerships, there's something I need to discuss with you. Her tone shifted slightly, becoming more formal. The media interest in this project is growing faster than anticipated. Marcus frowned. Media attention had been mentioned in the contract, but in vague terms, he hadn't given much thought to. What does that mean exactly? We've had inquiries from several agricultural journals, 2 national newspapers, and a documentary filmmaker, Alexandra explained. They're interested in covering the transformation of Harrington Farm as it happens, the human story behind sustainable agriculture adaptation. The very idea made Marcus uncomfortable. I'm not much for cameras and interviews. I understand that, Alexandra said carefully. And you have no contractual obligation to participate in media opportunities beyond allowing photography of the physical installations. But, she hesitated briefly. Your story is compelling, Marcus. A 4th-generation farmer facing climate challenges, developing innovative solutions despite limited resources. That narrative helps other farmers relate to what we're doing. Here. Marcus ran a hand through his graying hair, discomfort evident in his posture. I'm just trying to save my farm, not become some poster boy for your organization. It's not about making you a poster boy, Alexandra countered. It's about showing that sustainable agriculture isn't just for wealthy hobby farms or huge corporate operations. It's for family farms like yours, farms with history and real stakes. Before Marcus could respond, Lily approached from the direction of the farmhouse, carrying a cooler that presumably contained lunch for them. At 21, she had taken to the project with boundless enthusiasm, serving as an unofficial liaison between the construction teams and her father when classes didn't require her presence at the university. Everything okay? She asked, sensing the tension between them. Alexandra quickly explained the media situation. Louis's eyes lit up with excitement. Dad, that's fantastic! Think about how many other farmers could benefit from seeing what's happening here. Your designs could help people across the country. Marcus looked from his daughter's eager face to Alexandra's more measured expression. He recognized the gentle manipulation at play, bringing up this topic with Lily present, knowing she would support the broader mission. Yet he couldn't deny the logic of their position. If this project succeeded, why shouldn't others benefit from the knowledge gained? I'll think about it, he conceded reluctantly. But no promises. And I'm not doing any TV interviews where they try to make me cry about almost losing the farm or whatever dramatic angle they want to push. Alexandra nodded seriously. We maintain creative control over any coverage involving our projects. No exploitation, no artificial drama, just honest documentation of the process, challenges included. That last point caught Marcus's attention. You want to show the problems too, not just the successes? Absolutely, Alexandra confirmed. The whole point of the demonstration project is to learn both from what works and what doesn't. Showing only perfect outcomes creates unrealistic expectations that discourage adoption. Marcus found himself respecting her more for this perspective. Too many agricultural innovations had been marketed as miracles, only to disappoint when implemented in real-world conditions. If Ecovision was willing to document failures and adjustments, perhaps their approach was more genuine than he'd initially believed. Fine, he said finally. I'll talk to the journalists. But Lily handles any social media stuff. He pointed at his daughter. I'm not learning TikTok or whatever else you've been suggesting. Lily grinned triumphantly. Deal! I already have ideas for documenting the construction process. Before and after comparisons are going to be incredible. As they settled into lunch at the makeshift table near the construction site, Marcus reflected on how much had changed in just a few short weeks. The farm that had been teetering on financial collapse was now bustling with activity and purpose. The fields that had seemed like a burden were now viewed as an opportunity, a canvas for demonstrating climate-adaptive techniques. Most significantly, Marcus's own self-perception had shifted. After years of seeing himself as a failing caretaker of his family's legacy, he now found his ideas valued, his experience respected. It was as if Alexandra had held up a different mirror, showing him not the struggling farmer he'd come to see himself as, but an innovative thinker with valuable contributions to make. The construction of the greenhouse marked only the beginning of the transformation. As summer gave way to fall, the project expanded across the farm. 10 acres were designated for immediate soil rehabilitation through cover cropping and biochar application. The old barn was retrofitted with energy-efficient systems and converted into a combination workshop, educational space, and monitoring hub for the farm's integrated systems. True to her word, Alexandra ensured that Marcus remained central to every decision. When technical challenges arose, as they inevitably did, she brought engineers and agronomists to the farm to collaborate with Marcus on solutions that honored both scientific principles and practical farming realities. The first test of their partnership came in October when heavy rains threatened to delay the greenhouse completion. The construction team proposed modifications to the original design to accommodate faster assembly changes that would alter some of the features Marcus had specifically incorporated. These rain patterns are exactly why I included the step drainage system in the first place, Marcus argued during an emergency meeting in the barn. Cutting that feature to save 2 weeks of construction time defeats the whole purpose. The lead engineer pushed back, citing budget concerns and timeline commitments. Alexandra listened to both sides, then made her decision. "We stick with Marcus's drainage design," she declared firmly. "That's not negotiable, but let's explore alternative assembly methods for the superstructure that might recover some of the time without compromising functionality." It wasn't the answer the engineering team wanted, but Alexandra's support validated Marcus's input in a way that strengthened their partnership. After the engineers departed to develop alternative approaches, she stayed behind in the barn. "Thank you," Marcus said simply, "for backing me up." Alexandra studied him thoughtfully. "I didn't back you up because I like you, Marcus. I back you up because you were right. Your drainage design reflects decades of observation of how water moves across this specific landscape. That knowledge is precisely why we partnered with you." And her candor was refreshing. There was no patronizing reassurance, just professional respect. Marcus appreciated that more than any empty platitudes. "The first agricultural journalist is arriving tomorrow," Alexandra continued, changing subjects. "Emilia Vasquez from Modern Farming Quarterly. She's one of the most respected writers in sustainable agriculture. Are you prepared for the interview?" Marcus had spent several evenings reviewing the talking points Lily had helped him prepare, but anxiety still churned in his stomach at the prospect of being interviewed. "As ready as I'll ever be, I suppose." "Just be yourself," Alexandra advised. Emilia isn't looking for polished corporate responses. She wants to understand the real challenges and opportunities from a farmer's perspective. "And if I say something that contradicts EcoVision's messaging?" Marcus challenged. Alexandra's response was immediate and firm. "Then that's what gets published. This isn't a publicity stunt, Marcus. It's documentation of a collaborative process, disagreements included." The next morning, Emilia Vasquez arrived at the farm, a serious woman in her 50s with a notebook and a keen eye for agricultural details. She spent the first hour simply walking the property with Marcus, asking insightful questions about his farming practices before EcoVision's involvement and his hopes for the demonstration project. To Marcus's surprise, the interview felt more like a professional conversation than an interrogation. Emilia was particularly interested in his greenhouse design, pressing for details about how he developed the concept without formal architectural training. "I've been solving problems on this farm since I was 12 years old," Marcus explained as they examined the partially completed greenhouse structure. "When equipment breaks and you can't afford new parts, you figure out creative repairs. When weather patterns change and traditional methods stop working, you adapt. This greenhouse design came from 20 years of observing what works and what doesn't in this particular location." End quote. Emilia nodded, making notes. "And how has the collaboration with EcoVision changed your approach? Do you feel your original vision is being respected?" The question touched on Marcus's initial fears about the partnership. He considered his answer carefully, aware that Alexandra was within earshot, showing another journalist the water reclamation system under construction. "Honestly, I was skeptical at first," Marcus admitted. "I assumed they'd take my basic ideas, pat me on the head, and implement whatever their engineers thought best. But that's not how it's worked. He gestured toward the greenhouse, where his drainage design was being implemented, despite the construction delays it caused. They've actually improved my concepts without changing their core function. It's been educational. When the article was published 3 weeks later, Marcus was surprised to find himself accurately quoted, his contributions to the project prominently featured rather than minimized. The piece presented him not as a struggling farmer rescued by corporate benevolence, but as an innovative thinker whose practical experience complemented EcoVision's technical expertise. Photos of his original blueprints appeared alongside images of the construction, visually connecting his ideas to their implementation. The article marked a turning point in how Marcus viewed the project and his role within it. What had begun as a desperate attempt to save his failing farm was evolving into something more significant, a potential model for climate adaptation that combined traditional farming wisdom with cutting-edge technology. As winter settled over the Midwest, the greenhouse neared completion. Despite the construction delays, the structure was enclosed before the first heavy snow, allowing interior work to continue regardless of weather conditions. By January, the environmental control systems were operational, and the first test plantings were underway. Marcus spent hours each day in the greenhouse, monitoring the automated systems while making notes on performance and potential improvements. The space felt like a physical manifestation of his mind, his ideas given form and function, enhanced by technologies he would never have been able to access independently. One snowy afternoon, as Marcus adjusted the settings on a hydroponic growing section, he heard the greenhouse door open behind him. He turned to find Alexandra entering, stamping snow from her boots. "How's our baby doing today?" she asked, a phrase she'd taken to using for the greenhouse. "Environmental controls are maintaining temperature perfectly despite the cold snap," Marcus reported. "And the seedlings in Section 3 are showing excellent early development. I think we've got the nutrient mix right this time." Alexandra nodded approvingly as she moved through the space, checking readings on various monitors. She had been dividing her time between this project and EcoVision's headquarters in Chicago, typically spending 3 days a week at the farm. Her visits had become a comfortable routine, their initial wariness giving way to mutual respect and effective collaboration. "The board is impressed with the progress," she said, pausing beside a tank where tilapia swam in carefully maintained water that would eventually feed nutrients to the plant systems. "They've approved accelerating Phase 2 of the project. We can begin the soil remediation work on the eastern fields as soon as the ground thaws." This was welcome news. The accelerated timeline would mean greater disruption to normal farm operations in the short term, but would potentially allow for test plantings in the rehabilitated soil by late summer, a full growing season earlier than originally planned. "That's good," Marcus acknowledged. "But I've been thinking about the eastern section design. The swale positioning needs adjustment based on how the water moved during those heavy October rains." Alexandra pulled out her tablet. "Show me what you're thinking." They spent the next hour huddled over digital maps and topographical renderings, Marcus drawing from his lifetime of observing water movement across the property, while Alexandra applied hydrological principles to refine his intuitive knowledge. The result was a modified design that would better capture and direct rainfall for passive irrigation while preventing erosion. As they finished, Alexandra set aside her tablet and looked at Marcus with unexpected seriousness. "There's something else we need to discuss. The media coverage of this project has generated significant interest. We've received inquiries from several prominent venues wanting to feature the farm more prominently." Marcus tensed slightly. While he had gradually grown more comfortable with the agricultural journalists who occasionally visited, the prospect of greater publicity still made him uneasy. "What kind of venues?" "A national news program wants to do a segment on climate adaptation in agriculture, featuring this project as their primary example. And there's a major sustainability conference in Denver this spring. They've requested that we present the Harrington Integrated Growing System as a case study." The use of his name in the system's title still felt strange to Marcus. "I assume you'll handle the conference presentation." Alexandra shook her head. "They've specifically asked for both of us to present. Your perspective as the farmer innovator is what makes this project unique." She studied his expression. "This makes you uncomfortable?" It wasn't a question. but Marcus answered anyway. I'm a farmer, not a public speaker. I wouldn't know what to say to a room full of experts and academics. You would say exactly what you say to me when we're solving problems together, Alexandra replied. Your practical knowledge and approach to innovation is what those experts and academics need to hear. Too many sustainability initiatives fail because they're designed without input from the people who will actually implement them day to day. Marcus moved restlessly around the greenhouse, checking plants that didn't need checking. I never signed up to be the face of anything. Actually, you did, Alexandra countered gently. The educational component was clearly outlined in the contract. We've just been ramping up gradually to respect your comfort level. She approached him directly. Marcus, your story matters. A fourth-generation farmer, developing climate-adaptive solutions, while fighting to preserve his family legacy that reaches people in ways that technical specifications never will. Using my financial struggles to tug at heartstrings, you mean? Marcus said bitterly. Alexandra's expression hardened slightly. That's not fair, and you know it. We've never once presented this project as a rescue mission. Every piece of media coverage has emphasized your technical contributions and innovative thinking. She held his gaze steadily. The conference organizers don't want you because they feel sorry for you. They want you because you represent the critical bridge between traditional agricultural knowledge and future sustainability. The conviction in her voice gave Marcus pause. Over the months of their partnership, he had come to trust Alexandra's judgment and integrity. She had consistently advocated for his input, ensured his designs were credited, and treated him as a collaborator rather than a beneficiary. When is this conference? He asked finally. April 15th through 17th. Our presentation would be on the 16th. She seemed to sense his wavering resistance. Lily would be on spring break then. She could come along if having her there would make you more comfortable. The thought of his daughter witnessing him speak at a national conference held unexpected appeal. Lily had always believed in his ideas when no one else did. Seeing her father validated in such a public forum might mean something to her. I'll think about it, Marcus conceded, the phrase that had become his standard response to new challenges within the project. Alexandra accepted this with a nod, knowing from experience that his consideration usually led to eventual agreement. That's all I ask. And regarding the news program, one thing at a time, Marcus interrupted. Let me get my head around the conference first. The conversation shifted to more immediate concerns: adjustments to the hydroponic nutrient delivery system, plans for early spring planting, modifications to the solar array positioning. The familiar technical discussion eased the tension, returning them to the collaborative rhythm they had established. That evening, after Alexandra had departed for Chicago, Marcus mentioned the conference invitation to Lily over dinner. Her excited response was predictable. Dad, that's amazing. A national sustainability conference? That's huge validation for your designs. Marcus poked at his food noncommittally. It's more about EcoVision's implementation than my original concepts. That's not true, Lily countered. I've seen how they talk about you in the media coverage. They always emphasize that the core innovations came from you. She set down her fork emphatically. You have to do this. Do you know how many agricultural students would benefit from hearing directly from a farmer who's developing these systems? Her perspective hadn't occurred to him. You think ag students would be interested? Are you kidding? Everyone's talking about sustainable adaptation, but most of the prominent voices are either academics with little practical experience or corporate representatives pushing proprietary technologies. An actual farmer with generations of hands-on knowledge and innovative ideas? Lily shook her head in disbelief at his hesitation. That's exactly what's been missing from the conversation. Marcus considered this, remembering his own frustration with agricultural conferences he'd attended years ago, where presenters seemed disconnected from the daily realities of running a farm. Perhaps he did have something worthwhile to contribute to the discussion. Alexandra mentioned you could come along, since it's during your spring break, he said casually. Lily's eyes lit up. Really? I'd love that. I could help you prepare your presentation, maybe even create some visual aids using those before and after photos I've been documenting. Her enthusiasm was infectious, gradually eroding Marcus's reservations. By the time they finished dinner, he He found himself cautiously warming to the idea of presenting at the conference, especially with Lily's support. Over the next 2 months, as winter's grip gradually loosened and the first signs of spring emerged, the greenhouse proved its value. While fields lay dormant under melting snow, vibrant growth flourished inside the climate-controlled environment. The first harvest of leafy greens and herbs provided a modest but welcome income during a season that had traditionally been financial dry period for the farm. More significantly, the greenhouse served as a living laboratory where Marcus could refine techniques before implementing them on a larger scale when weather permitted. Each successful growing cycle in the controlled environment built his confidence in the broader systems planned for the fields. The greenhouse also became an unexpected community hub as word spread about the innovative project underway at Harrington Farm. Local farmers began stopping by, initially out of curiosity or skepticism, but increasingly seeking information about specific techniques they might adapt for their own operations. Marcus found himself in the unfamiliar role of teacher, explaining the systems he'd designed to fellow farmers who now viewed him as a resource rather than a struggling peer. These informal sessions proved valuable practice for the approaching conference. With each explanation he provided to neighbors, Marcus grew more articulate about the principles behind his designs, more confident in defending his unconventional approaches. Lily recorded some of these conversations, helping him identify his strongest explanations and areas where he tended to get too technical for a general audience. By early April, preparations for both the conference and the spring planting were in full swing. The soil rehabilitation work on the eastern fields had begun, with specialized equipment turning biochar and organic amendments into the depleted soil while establishing the swale system Marcus and Alexandra had designed for water management. As the conference date approached, Marcus found his anxiety returning despite his careful preparation. The night before they were scheduled to depart for Denver, he retreated to the greenhouse after dinner, seeking the calm he always found among the plants and sophisticated systems that represented the integration of his ideas and, Ecovision's resources. He was checking the automated irrigation schedule when he heard the greenhouse door open. Expecting Lily, he was surprised to see Alexandra entering instead. She wasn't scheduled to return to the farm until after the conference. "Thought I might find you here," she said, approaching through the central aisle where tomato plants were beginning to climb their supports. "Conference nerves," Marcus admitted. "Wanted to make sure everything was set for a while." "We're gone." Alexandra nodded, understanding. "The first major presentation is always the hardest. After this one, you'll wonder why you were so worried." "Bold assumption that there will be more presentations after this one," Marcus replied wryly. "There will be," she said with quiet certainty. "Once you see how valuable your perspective is to others, you won't be able to keep quiet." She handed him a small package. "I brought you something for tomorrow." Marcus unwrapped the package to find a handsome leather portfolio, embossed with his name, and a simplified version of his greenhouse design. "For your presentation notes," Alexandra explained, "though I doubt you'll need them. You know this material better than anyone." The thoughtful gift touched him unexpectedly. "Thank you. It's perfect." "There's something else I wanted to discuss before tomorrow," Alexandra said, her tone shifting to something more serious. "The success of this project has exceeded our initial projections. The board is interested in expanding the partnership model to other farms in this region, creating a network of demonstration sites with different focuses." Marcus wasn't surprised. The media coverage and industry attention had been building steadily. That makes sense. Different soil conditions, different climate challenges, different crop focuses. "Exactly," Alexandra confirmed. "But we'd want the Harrington farm to serve as the hub, the primary training and coordination center for the network." She watched his reaction carefully. "It would mean expanding your role beyond managing this farm's systems. You'd be involved in selecting partner farms, adapting your designs to their specific conditions, training other farmers." The implication of her words gradually sank in. "You're offering me a job." "I'm acknowledging the job you've already been doing informally," she corrected. "Those farmers who've been stopping by for advice? That's just the beginning. Your ability to translate complex sustainability concepts into practical farming applications is rare, Marcus." We'd like to formalize and expand that role. The conversation was interrupted by Lily's arrival, bubbling with excitement about their trip. Alexandra didn't press the matter further, simply noting that they could discuss the details after the conference. But as they finalized preparations for their departure the next morning, Marcus found himself considering the possibility with unexpected interest. The sustainability conference in Denver was larger and more prestigious than Marcus had anticipated. Over 3,000 attendees from across the country and beyond filled the convention center mix of academics, industry representatives, government officials, and a smaller contingent of practicing farmers and ranchers. The Harrington EcoVision presentation was scheduled for the second day in one of the main halls. As Marcus stood backstage with Alexandra and Lily, peering out at the hundreds of people taking their seats, his confidence wavered. "There are at least 500 people out there," he muttered, tugging uncomfortably at the collar of his new shirt. He had refused to wear a suit despite Alexandra's gentle suggestion, compromising with dark jeans and a button-down shirt that Lily had helped him select. 527, according to registration, Alexandra confirmed, unhelpfully precise. "It's one of the most highly anticipated sessions of the conference." Marcus shot her a look of mingled disbelief and terror. "Not helping." Louis squeezed his arm reassuringly. "You've got this, Dad. Just talk to them the same way you talk to the farmers who visit the greenhouse. These people are here because they want to learn from you." Before Marcus could respond, the moderator began introducing their session, describing the Harrington Farm Project as a groundbreaking integration of generational farming knowledge and cutting-edge sustainable technology. He heard Alexandra's name announced first, watched her walk confidently onto the stage to polite applause, and then froze momentarily as his own name was called. Lily gave him a gentle push forward. "Go show them what a real farmer innovator looks like." Drawing a deep breath, Marcus stepped onto the stage. The lights were brighter than he'd expected, making it difficult to see individual faces in the audience, a small mercy that helped calm his racing heart. He took his place beside Alexandra, who gave him an encouraging nod as she began their presentation. The format they'd agreed upon allowed Alexandra to provide the technical framework and project overview, with Marcus contributing the practical implementation details and design principles. As she smoothly described EcoVision's mission and the selection process that had led them to Harrington Farm, Marcus found his anxiety gradually subsiding. The story she told was accurate and respectful, consistently emphasizing the collaborative nature of the project, rather than positioning EcoVision as saviors or Marcus as a recipient of charity. When his turn came to speak, Marcus ignored the prepared notes in his portfolio and simply began talking about his farm, his challenges, and the solutions he developed through years of observation and experimentation. The giant screens behind him displayed photos of his original hand-drawn blueprints alongside images of the completed Macquarie greenhouse and rehabilitated fields, visually reinforcing the evolution from concept to reality. "Farming isn't just about growing crops," Marcus explained, finding his rhythm as he spoke. "It's about developing a relationship with a specific piece of land, understanding how water moves across its contours, how soil conditions vary from one field to another, how microclimates form in different areas. That knowledge can't be generalized in a textbook or replicated by an algorithm. It comes from generations of careful observation." As he continued, describing how his designs incorporated this localized knowledge with adaptable technologies, Marcus noticed the audience leaning forward in their seats, many taking notes. These weren't people humoring a simple farmer. They were professionals genuinely interested in his perspective. "The most important thing we've learned from this project," he concluded, "is that successful climate adaptation in agriculture requires both innovation and tradition. New technologies and methods are essential, but they must be integrated with the deep understanding that comes from working the same land through changing conditions over time." The question and answer session that followed surprised Marcus with its depth and specificity. Attendees asked detailed questions about soil remediation techniques, water management strategies, and the integration of traditional crop rotation with newer permaculture principles. With each response, Marcus found himself growing more confident, realizing that his practical experience provided insights that even well-educated experts lacked. By the time the session ended, Marcus felt a surprising sense of accomplishment. As attendees approached the stage to continue conversations begun during the queue, Lily appeared at his side, beaming with pride. "Dad, you were amazing. People were hanging on your every word." One woman next to me was frantically writing down everything you said about the swale design. Before Marcus could respond, they were surrounded by conference attendees, eager to speak with him directly. For the next hour, he found himself engaged in conversations with farmers from different regions, university researchers interested in collaborating, and even a representative from the Department of Agriculture who expressed interest in featuring the Harrington Farm Project in the forthcoming report on climate adaptation strategies. That evening, at a reception for conference presenters, Marcus stood somewhat awkwardly in a corner, still processing the day's events. He was surprised when a distinguished older man approached, introducing himself as Dr. Robert Chen, Alexandra's father and the founder of Furin Ecovision Designs. "My daughter has told me a great deal about you and your innovations, Mr. Harrington," Dr. Chen said, shaking Marcus's hand warmly. "After seeing your presentation today, I understand why she was so impressed by your greenhouse designs." "Your daughter has been instrumental in making those designs a reality," Marcus replied diplomatically. "I had the ideas, but Ecovision provided the means to implement them properly." Dr. Chen smiled knowingly. "Alexandra has always had an eye for recognizing genuine innovation, even in unlikely places. When she first described finding your blueprints, I was skeptical not of their quality, but of whether a true partnership could be developed between an independent farmer and our organization." "I had the same doubts," Marcus admitted. "Yet here we are," Dr. Chen observed, gesturing to the room where agricultural experts from around the country were networking. "Your presentation today has generated significant interest. I've already been approached by 3 potential funders wanting to support the regional network Alexandra has proposed." This caught Marcus off guard. "She mentioned that idea to me, but I didn't realize it was already being discussed with potential backers." "My daughter believes in planning ahead," Dr. Chen said with a hint of paternal pride. "She sees the Harrington Ecovision partnership as a template that could be replicated with appropriate modifications for regional variations. The key element being the collaborative approach bringing together technical expertise and generations of practical knowledge." As Dr. Chen elaborated on the potential expansion, Marcus caught sight of Alexandra across the room, deep in conversation with a group of international delegates. She had changed from her presentation attire into an elegant evening dress, looking every bit the sophisticated business executive. Yet when she glanced his way and smiled briefly before returning to her conversation, Marcus was reminded of the woman who had appeared at his farm months ago, studying his blueprints with genuine interest rather than professional courtesy. The contrast between then and now was striking. The struggling farmer showing his hand-drawn designs to a stranger had been transformed into a respected innovator presenting to hundreds of sustainability experts. The failing farm, teetering on bankruptcy, had become a vibrant demonstration site, attracting national attention. And the solitary man fighting alone to preserve his family's legacy was now at the center of a collaborative network that might help countless other farmers adapt to changing conditions. "She changed my life, you know," Marcus said quietly, almost to himself. Dr. Chen studied him thoughtfully. "I suspect the influence has been mutual, Mr. Harrington. My daughter has led many projects, but this one has engaged her in a way I haven't seen before. Technical challenges have always stimulated her mind, but your project has captured her heart as well." Before Marcus could process this observation, Lily appeared, apologizing for the interruption, but explaining that another group of attendees was eager to discuss specific aspects of the greenhouse design with her father. As Marcus excused himself, Dr. Chen offered a final observation. "The best partnerships, Mr. Harrington, transform both parties. You came to this project seeking to save your farm. I believe you may have found something more significant, your true calling." The remainder of the conference passed in a blur of presentations, conversations, and networking opportunities. By the final day, Marcus had collected dozens of business cards, invitations to visit other sustainable agriculture projects, and requests to provide consultation on farm adaptation strategies. The overwhelmed farmer who had arrived in Denver had been replaced by a man increasingly comfortable in his unexpected role as an agricultural innovator. On the flight home, as Lily slept in the seat beside him, Marcus reflected on the whirlwind events of the past 6 months. From the moment Alexandra had appeared on his farm deliberately lost, but actually searching for exactly what she found, his life had followed a path he could never have anticipated. Dr. Chen's words about transformation echoed in his mind. He had indeed been transformed, but not simply by the financial stability the project provided or the validation of his ideas. Something more fundamental had shifted in Marcus's perception of himself and his place in the world. The knowledge he had taken for granted, accumulated through generations of working the same land, now revealed itself as valuable expertise, worth sharing beyond the boundaries of Harrington Farm. As the plane began its descent toward home, Marcus made 2 decisions. First, he would accept Alexandra's offer to formalize his role in the regional network, using his experience to help other farmers develop site-specific adaptation strategies. Second, he would propose a modification to the greenhouse design that had been taking shape in his mind since observing the water usage patterns during the first months of operation and enhancement. That would further increase efficiency while simplifying maintenance. Both decisions reflected his evolution from a passive recipient of assistance to an active partner in innovation. Both acknowledged that the future of Harrington Farm lay not in isolated struggle, but in connected collaboration. And both honored the legacy he had once feared losing, not by preserving it unchanged, but by allowing it to grow into something his ancestors could never have imagined, but would surely recognize as an extension of their own relationship with the land. The April sun was setting as they drove from the airport back to the farm, casting long shadows across fields that now showed signs of renewal rather than decline. The greenhouse glowed at the property's edge, its lights illuminating plants thriving despite the lingering chill outside. Construction equipment stood ready near the western fields where the next phase of implementation would begin. The following week, as Marcus parked the truck in front of the farmhouse, its exterior now repaired and repainted as part of the project's comprehensive approach, he noticed Alexandra's car already there. Though she hadn't been scheduled to return until the next day, he found her in the greenhouse, reviewing data on the monitoring systems. "Couldn't wait to check on things?" he asked as he entered, the familiar humid warmth of the space enveloping him. Alexandra looked up from her tablet, smiling. "Systems have been running perfectly, but I wanted to be here. When you got back, how are you feeling after the conference whirlwind?" "Like my head's still spinning," Marcus admitted, "but in a good way. I had no idea there would be so much interest in what we're doing here." "I did," Alexandra said simply. "That's why I was so persistent about getting you to present." She set her tablet aside. "The feedback has been overwhelming positive. 3 major agricultural universities have requested site visits, and the Regional Sustainability Coalition wants us to host their summer workshop." Marcus nodded, unsurprised after the reception he'd received at the conference. "I'd been thinking about your proposal, the formalized role in the regional network." "And?" Alexandra's expression remained professionally neutral, but a hint of anticipation shone in her eyes. "I'd like to accept, with a few conditions," Marcus said, moving further into the greenhouse to check on a section of seedlings that had been planted just before their departure. "I want to maintain my primary focus on this farm's implementation. It's still the proof of concept for everything else we might do." Alexandra nodded agreement. "Absolutely. This remains the flagship project. And I want to be involved in selecting the partner farms," Marcus continued, "not just reviewing applications, but actually visiting the properties, meeting the farmers, understanding their specific challenges." "That was always the intention," Alexandra assured him. "Your ability to evaluate the practical viability of potential partnerships is essential." Marcus hesitated before adding his final condition. "And I want to revisit some aspects of the original greenhouse design. I've had some ideas for improvements based on the first months of operation." Instead of the resistance he half expected, Alexandra's face lit up with genuine interest. "What kind of improvements?" For the next hour, They walked through the greenhouse together as Marcus outlined his observations and proposed modifications. Alexandra asked insightful questions, occasionally offering technical suggestions that complemented his practical perspective. It was the same collaborative dynamic that had characterized their best moments throughout the project, each contributing their unique expertise toward a shared goal. As they finished discussing the final modification, an enhancement to the water recycling system that would reduce consumption by an additional 20%, Alexandra leaned against a support column, studying him with an expression Marcus couldn't quite interpret. "What?" he asked finally, self-conscious under her scrutiny. "I was just thinking about that first day," she said, "when I accidentally found my way to your farm and you showed me your blueprints." Marcus smiled at the memory. Not so accidental after all. "The farm visit was planned," Alexandra acknowledged, "but discovering your designs was genuine serendipity. I came looking for a suitable location and found not just land, but a partner." She paused, then added, "I've led many projects for EcoVision, but this one is different. The collaboration with you has produced something greater than either of us could have created independently." The sincerity in her voice resonated with Marcus's own reflections during the flight home. "I was thinking the same thing," he admitted. "When you first showed up with those black SUVs and told me who you really were, I assumed the partnership would be mostly on paper, that my contribution had ended with showing you those initial designs. And now? Now I understand that the real value isn't in the blueprints themselves, but in the ongoing process of combining different types of knowledge." Marcus gestured to the thriving plants surrounding them. "Your team knows things I could never have learned on my own, but I know this land in ways they never could. Together, we're creating something that honors both perspectives." Alexandra nodded, satisfaction evident in her expression. "That's exactly what my father hoped for when he founded EcoVision, true collaboration between technical innovation and practical experience." She straightened up, becoming more businesslike. "So we have an agreement on your role in the regional network?" "We do," Marcus confirmed. "Though we'll need to work out a schedule that allows me to keep this farm running while taking on the additional responsibilities." "I have some ideas about that," Alexandra said, a hint of mischief in her tone. "But they can wait until tomorrow. You must be exhausted after the conference and travel." As if on cue, Marcus felt the fatigue he'd been ignoring wash over him. "We should continue this discussion in the morning," he agreed, "after I've had a chance to check on the rest of the farm." They walked together toward the greenhouse exit, the automated systems quieting around them as sensors detected their departure. Outside, the evening had deepened into early night, stars appearing in the clear spring sky above the farm. In the distance, the lights of the farmhouse glowed warmly, where Lily was already unpacking and doubtless planning how to share their conference experiences on the project's increasingly popular social media accounts. Alexandra paused beside her car, keys in hand. "You know, when we first met, you told me your ideas didn't pay the bills. Do you still believe that?" Marcus considered the question, thinking of the financial stability the project had brought, the growing interest from other organizations, the potential for the regional network to expand his role and influence. "I was wrong about a lot of things back then," he admitted, "including that. Ideas alone don't change the world," Alexandra said thoughtfully. "But ideas shared, ideas implemented, ideas adapted to real conditions, those can transform everything." She opened her car door, then added, "I'm glad you shared yours with a stranger that day." As her car disappeared down the gravel drive, Marcus turned to survey the farm that had been his family's legacy for 4 generations. The original Harringtons could never have imagined the sophisticated systems now taking root in their soil. Just as Marcus himself could never have predicted the path that would unfold from a chance encounter and a reluctant sharing of hand-drawn blueprints. Yet for all the technological advancements now incorporated into the operation, the fundamental relationship remained unchanged. A human connection to a specific piece of land, an ongoing conversation between farmer and field, a commitment to stewardship that spanned generations. What had evolved was not the core purpose, but the methods, adapted to meet new challenges with new solutions. Marcus walked slowly toward the farmhouse, his boots crunching on the gravel path his grandfather had laid decades ago. Behind him, The greenhouse stood as a bridge between past and future, its design rooted in his hand-drawn blueprints, but realized through collaboration with a sustainability architect who had recognized the value in both his ideas and his experience. Tomorrow would bring new challenges, new adjustments, new opportunities to refine the systems they were building together. But tonight, Marcus simply felt grateful for the unexpected partnership that had saved his farm, for the daughter whose belief in him had never wavered, and for the courage to share his ideas when a stranger appeared on his doorstep, lost, but somehow exactly where she needed to be. As Marcus reached the farmhouse porch, he paused to look back at the transformed landscape. No longer a struggling operation fighting for survival, but a living laboratory where tradition and innovation worked in bird harmony. The journey from that first meeting to this moment had been neither simple nor easy, but standing here now, Marcus Harrington knew with absolute certainty that it had been worth every step. The struggling farmer who had shared his blueprints with a stranger had found not just financial salvation, but a renewed purpose. And as the first stars brightened in the darkening sky above Harrington Farm, that purpose seemed as vast and full of possibility as the universe itself, a legacy not merely preserved, but expanded beyond anything his ancestors could have imagined, yet still firmly rooted in the soil they had first turned generations ago. It was, Marcus reflected, as he turned to join his daughter inside, exactly the kind of sustainable future worth building, one blueprint, one collaboration, one transformed farm at a time. Early summer arrived in a burst of green productivity across Harrington Farm. 6 months into the project, the transformation was visible from every angle. The greenhouse operated at full capacity, producing a steady stream of high-value crops that supplied local restaurants and a weekend farmers market booth that had become surprisingly profitable. The rehabilitated eastern fields showed promising early growth, the innovative swale system efficiently capturing and distributing rainfall that would previously have caused erosion. Most remarkably, the farm had become a hub of constant activity. University research teams conducted soil studies to document the effectiveness of the regeneration techniques. Local farmers arrived regularly for informal workshops on specific aspects of the systems. School groups toured the greenhouse, wide-eyed at technology they'd never imagined on a family farm. Marcus had settled into his expanded role with unexpected ease. The presentation at the Denver conference had been followed by speaking engagements at agricultural extension programs throughout the region. Each presentation built his confidence and refined his ability to communicate complex concepts in accessible terms. His practical approach resonated particularly with fellow farmers who recognized in him not an academic theorist, but a peer who understood their daily challenges. The regional network Alexandra had proposed was moving from concept to reality. 3 additional farms had been selected as partner sites, each focusing on different aspects of sustainable adaptation. Marcus had personally visited each property, working with the farmers to identify site-specific opportunities and challenges. Construction would begin at the first partner farm in August, incorporating lessons learned from the Harrington prototype. On a warm June morning, Marcus stood at the edge of the western field, where the next phase of implementation was underway. Equipment operators carefully installed a specialized subsurface irrigation system designed to maximize water efficiency while minimizing evaporation. The system incorporated several of Marcus's modifications to the original design, adaptations based on his intimate knowledge of how water moved through the farm's varied soil conditions. Alexandra approached across the field, her usual business attire replaced by practical work clothes appropriate for a construction site. Over the months of the project, she had grown increasingly comfortable in this rural setting, just as Marcus had adapted to corporate boardrooms and conference halls. "The installation is ahead of schedule," she observed, coming to stand beside him. "The crew says your soil maps have been incredibly precise, eliminating the need for extensive testing at each insertion point." Marcus nodded. "Advantages of farming the same land for decades. I could practically draw those soil variations in my sleep." They stood in companionable silence for a moment, watching the methodical progress of the installation. Their working relationship had evolved into a comfortable partnership, characterized by mutual respect and complementary expertise. What had begun as Marcus's wariness and Alexandra's professional interest had deepened into something more personal, a friendship built on shared purpose and genuine appreciation for each other's contributions. The board reviewed the quarterly progress report yesterday, Alexandra said finally. They're extremely pleased with both the technical outcomes and the media attention the project has generated. Good to hear, Marcus replied. Though I still can't believe people find our irrigation system interesting enough to read about. Alexandra smiled at his persistent modesty. The technical innovations are impressive, but it's the human story that captures attention. People are inspired by Transformation A, struggling farm, becoming a model of resilience, a traditional farmer embracing sustainable technology without abandoning generational wisdom. End quote. Marcus shifted uncomfortably at this characterization, still not entirely at ease with his emerging public image. Speaking of the board, he said, changing the subject, have they made a decision about the expanded educational facilities? The proposed expansion would convert the farm's rarely used second barn into a dedicated training center where farmers from across the region could attend workshops on specific aspects of sustainable adaptation. The facility would include classroom space, demonstration areas, and accommodations for participants attending multi-day sessions. Actually, that's when I came to discuss, Alexandra said. They've not only approved the educational center but increased the budget by 30% to incorporate more advanced technology. They want to make it a flagship training facility for the entire Midwest region. Marcus whistled softly. That's a significant commitment. It reflects the success of what we've accomplished here, Alexandra replied. The data from the first 6 months has exceeded projections in nearly every category: crop yields, water efficiency, energy production. She turned to face him directly. But there's something else the board discussed that involves you more personally. Marcus raised an eyebrow questioningly. They've approved the creation of a new position, Director of Agricultural Innovation for the regional network. The role would involve overseeing the technical aspects of all partner farms, developing site-specific adaptations, and leading the educational programs at the new training center. She paused briefly. They want to offer you the position. The proposal caught Marcus off guard. Me? Not someone with formal training in agricultural science or engineering? Those qualifications would actually be disadvantages for this role, Alexandra explained. We have plenty of scientists and engineers. What we need is someone who can bridge the gap between technical knowledge and practical implementation. Someone who speaks both languages and has earned the trust of traditional farming communities. Marcus looked away, watching the installation team measure and mark the next section of field. The offer was flattering, but also intimidating. It represented a complete transformation of his professional identity from a struggling farmer focused on his own land to a regional leader helping others navigate the challenges he had faced. It would be a significant change, he admitted. I've never seen myself as anything but a farmer. You'd still be farming, Alexandra assured him. This farm would remain your base of operations and your primary demonstration site. The position would build on what you're already doing, informally consulting with partner farms, conducting workshops, refining techniques based on field results. What about management of this farm while I'm working with other sites? Alexandra had clearly anticipated this concern. The budget includes hiring an assistant farm manager to handle daily operations when you're away, someone you would select and train, who would implement your systems under your direction. Marcus considered this possibility. Having help managing the day-to-day work would free him to focus on innovation and education while ensuring the farm continued to operate effectively. It was a pragmatic solution to the logistical challenges his expanded role would create. And Lily? He asked. How would this affect her involvement when she's home from school? We've actually discussed creating an official internship position for her during breaks, Alexandra replied. She has the agricultural science background and intimate knowledge of the farm systems. Plus, she's become remarkably effective at communicating the project's mission to visitors and through social media. The thoughtfulness of these arrangements touched Marcus. Alexandra and her team had clearly considered how to support not just his professional transition, but the family dynamics involved. Even with these accommodations, however, the decision represented a profound shift in how Marcus saw himself and his future. I need some time to think about it, he said finally. Alexandra nodded, understanding. Of course. The position wouldn't officially begin until the training center is completed in September, so there's no rush. She checked her watch. I have a video conference with the construction team for the first partner site in 20 minutes. We can continue this discussion later. As she headed back toward the farmhouse where a temporary office had been established, Marcus remained at the field's edge, contemplating the unexpected crossroads before him. 6 months ago, his primary concern had been financial survival. Now he was considering a leadership role that would influence agricultural practices across the region. That evening, Marcus discussed the offer with Lily over dinner. Her immediate enthusiasm was predictable, but still helpful in clarifying his own thinking. "Dad, this is perfect for you," she exclaimed. "You've already been doing most of these things informally. This just gives you the official title and resources to expand your impact." Marcus pushed his food around his plate thoughtfully. It's a big leap from managing one farm to advising on a network of them. Plus all the educational components, the public speaking, the reporting to Ecovision's board. All things you've already been doing successfully, Lily pointed out. The Denver conference proved you can handle public speaking. The partner farm visits showed you can adapt your knowledge to different conditions. And Alexandra's team has been supporting the documentation and reporting requirements. Her practical assessment cut through Marcus's uncertainties with youthful directness. "You're afraid of failing, aren't you?" she asked perceptively. The question hit uncomfortably close to the truth. "Not exactly failing," Marcus corrected. "More like not meeting expectations. Right now, people are impressed because I'm just a farmer with innovative ideas. If I take a position with a fancy title, the standard changes. I'd be judged against professional agronomists and engineers." Lily considered this concern. "Maybe that's exactly why you're the right person for this role. You approach problems differently than they do. You combine book knowledge with generational experience. That perspective is valuable precisely because it's different." Her insight reminded Marcus why he valued his daughter's opinion despite her youth. She often saw situations with a clarity unclouded by the doubts that came with age and experience. "Besides," Lily added with a mischievous smile, "I think there might be another factor influencing your hesitation." "What's that?" "Alexandra Chen," Lily said simply. "You'd be working even more closely with her in this new role. The two of you have developed quite a partnership." Marcus felt a surprising warmth rise in his face. "It's a professional relationship," he insisted, perhaps too quickly. "We work well together because we respect each other's expertise." Lily replied skeptically. "That's why she drives out here on her days off to check on system performance even though everything can be monitored remotely. And why you spend hours revising presentation slides with her when either of you could do it alone." Marcus hadn't realized his daughter had been observing these interactions so closely. While he had gradually become aware of his growing personal connection to Alexandra, he had assumed it was less obvious to others. Apparently not. Working closely with someone creates a certain bond," he said neutrally, unwilling to explore this topic further with his daughter. "Especially when you're building something meaningful together." Lily let the subject drop, but her knowing smile suggested she remained unconvinced by his explanation. The remainder of their dinner conversation shifted to Juan. More immediate concerns: the upcoming visit from a documentary crew interested in featuring the farm in a series about climate adaptation, the scheduled delivery of specialized sensors for the Western Field installation, Lily's summer research project analyzing soil composition changes in the rehabilitated areas. Later that night, after Lily had gone to bed, Marcus sat on the farmhouse porch with a cup of tea, watching fireflies rise from the fields as darkness settled over the farm. The scene before him was both familiar and transformed the same land his family had worked for generations, now hosting innovations his grandfather could never have imagined. The irony wasn't lost on him. For years, he had feared failing to preserve his family's legacy. Now he was hesitating to accept a position that would extend that legacy far beyond the boundaries of Harrington Farm, influencing agricultural practices throughout the region. As Marcus pondered this contradiction, headlights appeared on the gravel road. He recognized Alexandra's car. Immediately she often worked late at the temporary office when deadlines approached. To his surprise, instead of continuing to the guest cottage where she stayed when working extended days at the farm, her car turned toward the farmhouse. Marcus set his tea aside as Alexandra parked and approached the porch. Even though, after a long day, she moved with purposeful energy. She had changed from her work clothes into casual attire, jeans and a simple blouse, but maintained the quiet confidence that seemed inseparable from her presence. "Hope I'm not interrupting your evening," she said, climbing the porch steps. "I saw the light and thought you might still be up." "Just enjoying the quiet," Marcus replied, gesturing to the empty chair beside him. "Tea, please." As Marcus went inside to prepare another cup, he felt an unexpected nervousness. Their countless professional conversations had established a comfortable rhythm. But this evening, encounter felt different, more personal, less defined by project requirements or technical discussions. When he returned with her tea, he found Alexandra studying the night sky with evident appreciation. "The stars are incredible here," she commented. "In Chicago, light pollution obscures all but the brightest." "One of the benefits of rural isolation," Marcus agreed, handing her the steaming cup. "Though I suppose it's not so isolated these days with all the project traffic." They sat in companionable silence for a moment, the nighttime chorus of crickets and distant frogs providing gentle background music to their thoughts. "Have you been considering the position?" Alexandra asked finally, her tone casual but her interest evident. "I have," Marcus confirmed, trying to wrap my head around such a significant change. Alexandra nodded understanding. "It would be a substantial shift in focus. Your concerns are completely valid." Marcus appreciated her acknowledgement. Throughout their partnership, Alexandra had never dismissed his reservations or pushed him toward decisions before he was ready. Her respect for his process had been a consistent feature of their collaboration. "Lily thinks I should take it," he admitted. "She sees it as a natural evolution of what I've already been doing." "She's perceptive," Alexandra observed. "But ultimately, it needs to feel right to you. The position was designed with your specific abilities in mind, but that doesn't mean you're obligated to accept it." Her words reminded Marcus of something that had become increasingly clear over the months of their partnership: Alexandra's genuine commitment to collaboration rather than coercion. From that first day when she examined his blueprints with authentic interest rather than professional courtesy, she had demonstrated a rare ability to recognize value in unexpected forms. "It's not about obligation," Marcus said slowly, organizing his thoughts as he spoke. "It's about identity, I suppose. For my entire adult life, I've defined myself as a farmer specifically, as the caretaker of this particular piece of land. Taking on a regional role means becoming something else, something I'm not sure I know how to be." End quote. Alexandra considered this thoughtfully. "When I first started EcoVision's agricultural division, I faced similar questions. My training was in architectural design and environmental systems, not farming. I wondered if I had any business advising on agricultural practices without having grown up in that world." This vulnerability surprised Marcus. Alexandra always projected such confidence that he had never considered she might have harbored similar insecurities. "What changed?" he asked. "I realized that innovation often happens at the intersection of different fields and perspectives," she replied. "My outsider viewpoint allowed me to see possibilities that traditional agricultural experts missed." But her expression grew more serious. "I also recognized the limitations of my theoretical knowledge. That's why partnerships with people like you are so essential. Neither perspective is complete on its own." Her insight resonated with Marcus's own experience. The most successful aspects of their project had emerged from the combination of his practical farming knowledge and her technical expertise, neither dominating, both essential. "Maybe that's what I'm struggling with," he admitted. "The idea that I'd be positioned as some kind of expert when I'm acutely aware of how much I don't know." Alexandra smiled. "The best experts are precisely those who recognize the limits of their knowledge. It's the people who think they know everything who cause the most damage." She sipped her tea thoughtfully. "Besides, the position isn't about having all the answers. It's about asking the right questions and bringing together diverse perspectives to find solutions. As clouds drifted across the moon, temporarily dimming the natural light on the porch, Marcus considered her words. The role she described wasn't about abandoning his identity as a farmer, but expanding it, becoming a connector between traditional agricultural knowledge and innovative approaches, between individual farms and Esrentine. Broader systems change. I appreciate you coming to talk about this, Marcus said. It helps to hear your perspective on the role. Actually, Alexandra confessed with a slight smile. I didn't come here specifically to discuss the position. I finished reviewing the soil analysis reports from the eastern fields and thought you might want to see the results. They're quite encouraging. Marcus chuckled. So, this was meant to be a business conversation after all? Initially, Alexandra acknowledged. But sometimes personal conversations are more important than business ones. The simple statement contained layers of meaning that hung in the air between them. Their relationship had always been primarily professional, defined by the shared purpose of the project. Yet over the months of collaboration, a deeper connection had undeniably formed, one based on mutual respect that had gradually evolved into genuine friendship, and perhaps something more. Before either could pursue this line of thought, headlights once again appeared on the gravel road. A moment later, Lily's friend's car pulled up to drop her off, after an evening movie in town. The interruption shifted the mood, returning them to more practical matters. As Lily joined them on the porch, the conversation naturally turned to the soil analysis results Alexandra had mentioned, the three of them discussing the implications for the next phase of planting while the night deepened. Around the farmhouse. Later, as Alexandra prepared to leave for the guest cottage, she paused at the steps. Think about what I said, Marcus, about innovation happening at the intersections. You've already proven your ability to work in that space. The position would simply give you more resources to expand what you've started here. End. As Marcus watched her drive the short distance to the cottage, he reflected on their conversation. The decision before him wasn't really about accepting a new job title. It was about embracing a broader vision of his role in agricultural adaptation, not just preserving his family's legacy on these 40 acres, but helping to create a legacy of resilience that could benefit farming communities throughout the region. Through the open window, he heard Lily moving around in the kitchen, humming softly as she prepared a late-night snack. Her confidence in his ability to take on this expanded role wasn't naive optimism. It was based on what she had already seen him accomplish. Perhaps it was time he recognized those capabilities in himself. The next morning, Marcus rose early and walked the property as he did each day, checking systems and observing the subtle changes that indicated the farm's gradual healing. The greenhouse hummed with efficient productivity. The rehabilitated eastern fields showed strong early growth. The western installation was proceeding ahead of schedule. By the time he returned to the farmhouse for breakfast, his decision had crystallized. When Alexandra arrived for their scheduled project meeting, Marcus was waiting with fresh coffee and renewed purpose. I'd like to accept the Director of Agricultural Innovation position, he said without preamble, as she settled at the kitchen table. With 2 conditions. Alexandra raised an eyebrow, the hint of a smile playing at her lips. I'm listening. First, I want to be involved in selecting my assistant farm manager. They need to understand that this is still a working family farm, not just a demonstration site. Absolutely. Alexandra agreed immediately. That person will be implementing your systems daily. Your approval is essential. Second, Marcus continued, I want assurance that this farm remains the primary testing ground for new approaches. Before we implement anything at partner sites, we try it here first. I won't recommend techniques to other farmers that I haven't Grant personally vetted. End. That was always the intention, Alexandra assured him. Harrington Farm is the cornerstone of the entire network. Your hands-on evaluation of new methods is precisely what gives our recommendations credibility with other farmers. With these concerns addressed, they spent the next hour discussing immediate next steps: the development of a job description for the assistant manager, a proposed timeline for the training center construction, plans for Marcus's gradual transition into the regional role while maintaining oversight of the farm's operations. As the conversation wound down, Alexandra pulled a formal offer letter from her briefcase. The board asked me to present this to you if you decided to accept. It outlines the position details, compensation package, and official start date. She slid the document across the table with a smile. Welcome to the next phase of our partnership, Director Harrington. The title sounded strange to Marcus's ears, but he accepted the letter with a newfound sense of purpose. 6 months ago, he had been calculating how much longer he could hold out before losing his family's farm. Now he was preparing to help other farmers avoid that fate by sharing the systems and approaches that had transformed his own operation. "I never imagined this outcome when you showed up pretending to be lost," he remarked, a hint of humor in his voice. "I may have been strategically misleading about my immediate purpose," Alexandra admitted, "but I was genuinely lost in a larger sense. We were looking for a farm with the right characteristics, yes, but more importantly, we needed a farmer with the right perspective, someone who understood the challenges firsthand, but remained open to innovative solutions." End quote. "And you found that by snooping at my blueprints," Marcus observed dryly. "What of my better moments of professional indiscretion?" Alexandra acknowledged with no sign of regret. "Though I prefer to think of it as recognizing valuable expertise in an unexpected place." As they sealed their expanded partnership with a handshake, Marcus reflected on the journey that had brought them to this point. What had begun with a struggling farmer sharing blueprints with a stranger had evolved into a collaboration that would potentially influence agricultural practices across the region. The transformation of Harrington Farm was only the beginning, a prototype not just for sustainable agriculture, but for a new kind of partnership between traditional farming knowledge and innovative Kime technology. Outside the farmhouse window, the morning sun illuminated fields that were once again thriving after years of struggle. The greenhouse caught the light and reflected it back, a gleaming symbol of possibility. And in the distance, where construction equipment prepared the ground for the next phase of implementation, the future took shape not just for this one farm that had been in the Harrington family for generations, but for a network of farms that would carry these innovations forward into an uncertain but hopeful future. Marcus Harrington, once a struggling farmer fighting alone to save his family's legacy, had become something he never anticipated: a bridge between traditional agricultural wisdom and sustainable innovation, between individual farm survival and systemic resilience. As he signed the offer letter accepting his new role, he understood that this wasn't an abandonment of his heritage, but its natural evolution, adapting to changing conditions, just as generations of farmers had always done, finding new ways to preserve what mattered most while embracing the possibilities of an unknown future. The farm that had once seemed like it might be the end of the Harrington legacy had instead become a new beginning, not just for Marcus and Lily, but for farmers throughout the region who would benefit from the unlikely partnership between a struggling farmer and a sustainability architect who had recognized the value in his hand-drawn blueprints. As August heat settled over the Midwest, the transformation of Harrington Farm continued at an accelerated pace. The western field installation was completed ahead of schedule, the subsurface irrigation system ready for testing before the fall planting. Construction on the educational center had begun, the old barn's sturdy frame reinforced to support modern facilities while maintaining its historical character. The greenhouse produced a steady stream of high-value crops that supplied local restaurants and farmers markets, generating income that supplemented the farm's traditional operations. Marcus had embraced his transition to Director of Agricultural Innovation with characteristic thoroughness. He had interviewed candidates for the Assistant Farm Manager position, eventually selecting a young woman with degrees in both agricultural science and business management, who had grown up on a family farm 2 counties over. Her combination of formal education and practical experience mirrored the integrated approach that had become Harrington Farm's hallmark. The regional network was taking shape, with construction underway at 2 partner farms and planning in progress for a third. Marcus visited each site weekly, working directly with the farmers to adapt core principles to their specific conditions and challenges. His approach practical, collaborative, rooted in respect for each farmer's knowledge of their own land-earned trust that more theoretical experts often struggled to establish. On the sweltering Thursday afternoon, Marcus returned from one such visit to find the farm hosting unusual activity. In addition to the regular construction crews, a team was setting up camera equipment near the greenhouse. He recognized the distinctive logos of a national news program on their vans and equipment cases. As Marcus parked his truck, Alexandra approached, dressed more formally than usual in a tailored suit appropriate for on-camera appearances. "I was hoping you'd get back before they started filming," she said. "They want to interview both of us about the project's progress and the expanding network." Marcus glanced down at his dusty work clothes and boots. "I'm not exactly camera-ready." "Actually, you're perfect," Alexandra countered. "They want authenticity, a real farmer doing real work, not someone who looks like they've never touched soil." Despite his growing comfort with public speaking, Marcus still found media appearances somewhat unsettling. "What's their angle?" he asked cautiously. "They're doing a special report on climate adaptation success stories," Alexandra explained. "Our project caught their attention because it combines immediate practical benefits for individual farms with broader system change potential." She studied his expression. "You don't have to participate if you're uncomfortable. I can handle the interview alone." Marcus shook his head. "No, the partnership story is important. I just need to clean up a bit and collect my thoughts." 30 minutes later, freshly showered and wearing what Lily called his professional farmer outfit, clean jeans, a button-down shirt, and his newer work boots, Marcus joined Alexandra and the news crew near the greenhouse. The reporter, a respected environmental journalist, known for substantive coverage rather than sensationalism, greeted him warmly. "Director Harrington, thank you for making time for us," she said, shaking his hand. "We're particularly interested in how this project bridges the gap between traditional farming practices and innovative climate adaptation technologies." The formal title still felt strange to Marcus, but he was gradually growing accustomed to his expanded role. "Happy to share our experience," he replied. "Though I should clarify that I'm still very much a working farmer, despite the fancy title." This comment set the tone for the interview that followed: honest, pragmatic, focused on real results rather than theoretical potential. As they walked the property, Marcus and Alexandra alternated, explaining different aspects of the systems they had implemented, their natural rapport and complementary expertise evident in their exchanges. "What makes this partnership unique," Alexandra explained as cameras captured footage of the greenhouse operations, "is that it begins with respecting the deep knowledge farmers already possess about their specific land and conditions. We're not imposing standardized solutions. We're enhancing existing expertise with additional tools and SRS technologies. Most farmers are natural innovators," Marcus added. "We've been adapting to changing conditions for generations. What the EcoVision partnership provides is access to resources and technical knowledge that would otherwise be out of reach for individual family farms." When the reporter asked about the project's financial viability, a critical concern for farmers considering similar adaptations, Marcus was straightforward about both challenges and benefits. "The initial investment is substantial," he acknowledged. "Without EcoVision's funding, these systems would have been impossible for a farm in our financial position. But the operational costs once systems are established are actually lower than conventional methods, while yields are higher and more reliable, despite increasingly erratic weather patterns." End quote. "That's why the demonstration network is so important," Alexandra continued. "It allows farmers to see these systems in action before making their own investments. And as we document results across different farm types and conditions, we're building a case for increased public funding and private investment in these transitions." As the interview proceeded to the rehabilitated eastern fields, now lush with diverse crops arranged in strategic polyculture groupings, the reporter asked Marcus about the personal impact of the project. "This farm has been in my family for 4 generations, he said, looking out over land that had nearly been lost. "A year ago, I was calculating how many more months I could hold on before being forced to sell. Now we're not just financially stable, but developing systems that could help other family farms survive similar challenges." "And beyond survival," Alexandra added, "these farms can become engines of regional resilience, producing more nutritious food with fewer inputs, regenerating soil health, reducing water consumption, and creating new economic opportunities in rural communities." The camera captured their easy collaboration as they explained the integrated water management system that connected the greenhouse fields, and newly constructed retention ponds, though neither would have articulated it this way. Viewers would later comment on the evident partnership between them, not just professional colleagues, but two people who had developed genuine bond, respect and affection through shared purpose and complementary strengths. After the formal interview concluded and the news crew packed up their equipment, the reporter lingered to ask a few additional questions off camera. This partnership between a traditional farmer and a sustainability architect is clearly effective, she observed. What advice would you give other organizations looking to create similar collaborations? Marcus and Alexandra exchanged glances, each deferring to the other to respond first. Finally, Alexandra spoke. Start by recognizing that different types of expertise have equal value. Technical knowledge isn't inherently superior to practical experience. The most effective solutions emerge when both perspectives are genuinely respected. And be prepared to adjust your expectations, Marcus added. Some of our most successful innovations came from failures in the original designs, moments when theory collided with reality and we had to develop new approaches together. After the news team departed, Marcus and Alexandra walked slowly back toward the farmhouse, discussing the interview and the progress on various project components. The easy rhythm of their conversation reflected months of collaboration that had evolved from initial awkwardness to genuine partnership. You've gotten quite good at these media appearances, Alexandra observed. A natural communicator when you're talking about something you care about. Marcus shrugged modestly. Easier when it's just explaining what we're actually doing rather than theoretical concepts. People connect with practical results. As they reached the farmhouse porch, Alexandra checked her watch. I need to head back to Chicago for meetings tomorrow, but I'll return for the partner farm coordination session on Monday. She hesitated slightly. Unless you'd like to join me in the city tomorrow? The Regional Sustainability Council is holding a reception for potential funders of agricultural initiatives. Having the Director of Agricultural Innovation there would strengthen our presentation considerably. The invocation caught Marcus off guard. While his role now regularly took him to partner farms and regional agricultural events, he had avoided the more formal networking functions in urban settings. I'm not much for fancy receptions, he admitted. Not sure I'd add much value among corporate executives and foundation directors. On the contrary, Alexandra countered, your presence would be invaluable. These potential funders need to hear directly from someone with practical farming experience, not just professional fundraisers and program officers. She added with a slight smile. Besides, you already have the perfect professional farmer outfit. This gentle teasing about his limited wardrobe had become a running joke between them. Marcus found himself smiling despite his reservations about the event. What time would we need to leave? I'd pick you up around noon, Alexandra replied. The reception starts at 6, but we could have dinner in the city beforehand. Make an evening of it. Something in her tone suggested this might be more than a strictly professional outing. Marcus considered the invitation. Chicago was only a 3-hour drive, and the farm operations were well managed now, with the assistant manager handling daily tasks. All right, he agreed finally, but I'm not wearing a tie. Deal, Alexandra said with evident pleasure, though I reserve the right to buy you one while we're there. You never know when it might come in handy for future Director of Agricultural Innovation duties. The next afternoon found Marcus experiencing an unfamiliar nervousness as he waited for Alexandra to arrive. He had packed an overnight bag, assuming they would return to the farm the following morning rather than driving back late at night. Lily, home for the weekend from her summer research program, had been inordinately interested in this development. So, dinner in Chicago with Alexandra before this reception? She had asked with poorly concealed amusement. Just work colleagues having a professional meal, I assume? Marcus had avoided engaging with her obvious implication, but the question had lingered in his mind. His relationship with Alexandra had evolved significantly from their first meeting professional respect, deepening into friendship and, increasingly, something more complex that neither had directly addressed. Their shared commitment to the project provided constant opportunities for collaboration, but personal interactions had remained largely within professional contexts. Until now, perhaps, While the stated purpose of the Chicago trip was unquestionably business-related, the suggestion to make an evening of it carried different implications than their usual project discussions. When Alexandra's car appeared on the gravel drive precisely at noon, Marcus felt a flutter of anticipation he hadn't experienced in years. He said goodbye to Lily, ignoring her knowing smile, and headed out with his overnight bag. Alexandra was dressed casually for the drive-in. Jeans and a light blouse, her usual professional attire presumably packed for the evening events. "Ready for your big city adventure?" she asked as he settled into the passenger seat. "As ready as I'll ever be," Marcus replied, his usual pragmatic tone masking the unexpected nervousness he felt. The 3-hour drive passed quickly in comfortable conversation about project developments, plans for the educational center, and progress at the partner farms. This familiar professional territory gradually eased Marcus's tension, reminding him of the solid foundation they had built over months of collaboration. As the rural landscape gave way to suburbs, and finally Chicago's skyline emerged on the horizon, their conversation shifted to more personal topics: Alexandra's early career challenges, Marcus's experiences raising Lily as a single father after his wife's death a decade earlier, shared observations about the satisfactions of work that aligned with personal values. These were aspects of each other's lives they had glimpsed, but rarely discussed directly, always maintaining a certain professional distance, despite their growing closeness. Alexandra had booked them rooms at a boutique hotel in downtown Chicago, elegant but not ostentatious, reflecting her practicality, despite her evident comfort in urban sophistication. After checking in and briefly refreshing from the drive, they met in the lobby to walk to an early dinner before the reception. "There's a restaurant a few blocks away that specializes in farm-to-table cuisine sourced from the region," Alexandra explained as they stepped out into the warm evening. "I thought you might appreciate seeing how urban establishments are connecting with local agricultural producers." The restaurant proved to be a thoughtfully designed space that celebrated its connections to regional farms through both decor and menu. The chef, learning of Marcus's role in sustainable agriculture innovation, visited their table to discuss sourcing challenges and opportunities, a conversation that reinforced Marcus's growing recognition of the broader food system his work now influenced. As they enjoyed the meal featuring ingredients from farms within a 100-mile radius, Marcus found himself increasingly at ease, despite the unfamiliar setting. Alexandra's evident comfort in this environment balanced his rural perspective, creating a dynamic that mirrored their professional collaboration, different backgrounds and expertise, combining to create something neither could accomplish alone. "This is quite different from my usual dinner at the farm," Marcus observed as they shared a dessert featuring seasonal berries from a farm he recognized from regional agricultural meetings. "Though I have to admit, it's nice to enjoy a meal I didn't have to cook myself." "One of the perks of city life," Alexandra agreed with a smile. "Though I've come to appreciate the fresh vegetables from your greenhouse more than any restaurant offering." As they walked from the restaurant toward the venue hosting their reception, the evening sun cast a golden light across the city's architecture. Alexandra pointed out buildings of particular interest, including several that incorporated sustainable design elements similar to those integrated into the farm systems. "The principles aren't so different," she explained, indicating a structure with an innovative rainwater collection system. "Whether rural or urban, we're all trying to work more effectively with natural processes rather than against them." The reception was held in a renovated industrial space, now serving as a sustainability-focused event venue. As they entered, Marcus felt momentarily intimidated by the gathering of well-dressed professionals engaged in animated conversations about funding priorities and impact metrics. He instinctively reached to adjust a tie he wasn't wearing, earning a reassuring smile from Alexandra. "Just be yourself," she advised quietly. "These people need your perspective, far more than you need to impress them." The next 2 hours surprised Marcus with their ease and productivity. Rather than feeling out of place, he found his practical farming experience and direct communication style drawing genuine interest from foundation directors and corporate sustainability officers. Many had read about the Harrington Farm Project in agricultural publications or seen the recent news segment, approaching him with thoughtful questions about implementation challenges and scalability concerns. Alexandra moved through the room with practiced grace, introducing Marcus to key contacts, and then stepping back to allow authentic conversations to develop. She had clearly orchestrated the evening to position him as a valuable expert rather than a novelty, building credibility with potential funders who could support the expansion of their partnership model to additional CREF farms. As the reception wound down, Marcus found himself in conversation with the director of a major agricultural foundation interested in funding climate adaptation initiatives for family farms. The director had grown up on a farm himself before pursuing an academic career, and their shared background created an immediate connection. "What impresses me most about your project," the director commented, "is how it honors traditional farming knowledge while incorporating necessary innovations. Too many initiatives start with the assumption that farmers need to be educated rather than collaborated with. That's been the key to our success," Marcus agreed. Alexandra and her team brought incredible technical expertise, but they approached the partnership with genuine respect for my understanding of the specific land and conditions. Every system was developed collaboratively rather than imposed. The director glanced across the room where Alexandra was engaged in conversation with several other attendees. "You're fortunate to have found such an alignment of values. In my experience, that's rarer than compatible technical approaches." By the time they left the reception, Marcus had collected business cards from several potential funders interested in visiting the farm and exploring support for the regional network. More importantly, he had established relationships that positioned him as a credible voice in agricultural sustainability. Conversations no longer just a farmer benefiting from corporate largesse, but a recognized innovator with valuable insights to contribute. As they walked back toward their hotel through the warm summer evening, Alexandra clearly pleased with how the event had unfolded, Marcus found himself reflecting on the extraordinary journey of the past year. From a struggling farmer facing financial ruin to a regional director helping shape the future of climate-adaptive agriculture, a transformation he could never have imagined when Alexandra first appeared on his property, supposedly lost but actually searching for exactly what she found. "Thank you for convincing me to come tonight," Marcus said, as they paused at a viewpoint overlooking the Chicago River, its surface reflecting the city lights. "I wouldn't have thought I had anything to offer in that environment." "You underestimate your impact," Alexandra replied. "Did you notice how people responded to you? They hear from plenty of polished presenters with impressive credentials, but very few people who can speak from direct experience about implementing these systems on a working family farm." Marcus nodded, accepting her assessment. After months of collaboration, he had learned to trust Alexandra's judgment about the value of his contributions, even when his own doubts surfaced. "Besides," she added with a smile, "I had selfish motives as well." Oh? I wanted an excuse to spend an evening away from project schedules and implementation timelines," Alexandra admitted. "To enjoy your company without a greenhouse tour or soil analysis discussion interrupting." The directness of this statement confirmed what Marcus had begun to suspect about the nature of this Chicago trip, that its professional purpose, while genuine, might also be providing cover for a more personal connection they had both been carefully navigating. "I've enjoyed that too," Marcus acknowledged, matching her honesty with his own. "More than I expected." As they continued their walk back to the hotel, conversation flowed easily between professional observations and more personal reflections. The boundaries between colleague and friend, between partnership and something deeper, becoming increasingly fluid as the evening progressed. In the hotel lobby, as they prepared to part ways for the night, Alexandra hesitated slightly. "There's a rooftop garden on the 15th floor that showcases urban agriculture techniques. If you're not too tired from the day, it might be worth seeing how they're adapting some of the same principles we're using at the farm." The invitation clearly extended their evening beyond professional obligations, and Marcus found himself accepting without hesitation. "I'd like that. Might give us some ideas for the training center design." The rooftop garden proved to be a thoughtfully designed space, combining aesthetic appeal with practical food production. Vertical growing systems, container gardens, and small-scale aquaponics demonstrations created a green oasis above the city streets. A few other hotel guests strolled among the plantings or sat at scattered seating areas. but the space was peaceful compared to the busy reception they had attended. As they walked along pathways lined with herb gardens and pollinator-friendly flowers, Marcus noted the ingenious use of space and integrated water management. "They're working with constraints I don't have to consider," he observed, "but the fundamental principles are similar to what we're implementing." "That's what drew me to agricultural systems originally," Alexandra replied. "The challenges vary dramatically between urban and rural settings, but the underlying approach of working with natural processes rather than against them remains consistent." They found an unoccupied seating area near the edge of the rooftop, offering a spectacular view of the illuminated city. The contrast between this urban landscape and the rural horizons of Harrington Farm could hardly have been more pronounced, yet sitting beside Alexandra felt unexpectedly familiar and comfortable. "A year ago, I couldn't have imagined being here," Marcus admitted, gazing out at the cityscape. "Not just physically in Chicago, but in this completely different reality where my ideas are valued and the farm is thriving." Alexandra turned slightly to face him. "And I couldn't have imagined finding the ideal partnership for her demonstration project through a supposedly accidental wrong turn down a country road." She smiled at the memory. "Though I maintain it was more serendipity than deception. We were evaluating several potential sites in the region. Your farm had the right physical characteristics, but finding your blueprints, that was genuine luck." "Look, that changed everything," Marcus acknowledged. The comfortable silence that followed held the weight of recognition that their professional collaboration had created something neither had anticipated, not just on the farm, but between them personally. As city lights reflected in Alexandra's eyes, Marcus found himself crossing a threshold he had approached cautiously for months. "This partnership has become important to me beyond the project itself," he said quietly. "Working with you has changed how I see not just the farm but my own capabilities. What you recognized in those blueprints, it was something I couldn't see in myself." Alexandra's expression softened. "That's not entirely true. Your resilience was evident in every adaptation you designed. You simply lacked the resources to implement them, not the vision to create them." She hesitated briefly before adding, "And what began as professional admiration for your innovative thinking has become something more personal for me as well." This mutual acknowledgement hung in the air between them, neither rushing to define it further, both recognizing the significance of the moment. Their professional relationship remained the foundation, but something new was being built upon that solid base. Something that complemented rather than complicated their work together. When Alexandra shivered slightly in the evening breeze, Marcus instinctively moved closer, offering the warmth of proximity in a gesture as natural as their collaborative problem-solving had become. She accepted this unspoken invitation, the distance between them diminishing physically just as it had professionally and personally over the months of their partnership. As the night deepened around them, their conversation continued, sometimes focused on project details and future plans, other times exploring personal hopes and concerns, all of it woven together in the integrated way that characterized their unique relationship. Neither felt compelled to draw artificial lines between the professional and personal. Both recognized that their strongest connection came precisely from the combination of shared purpose and genuine affection. When they finally returned to their rooms hours later, something significant had shifted. No dramatic declarations had been made, no explicit commitments established. But a mutual understanding had formed in acknowledgement that their partnership extended beyond the boundaries of the project into something neither had been seeking but both now valued deeply. The following morning, as they drove back to the farm, this new understanding suffused their interaction with comfortable warmth. Professional discussions about follow-up with potential funders and upcoming project milestones flowed naturally alongside more personal conversation and comfortable silences. The journey from colleagues to friends to something more had progressed without undermining the work that had brought them together. As the Chicago skyline receded in the rearview mirror and the landscape gradually transformed from suburbs to rural expanses, Marcus found himself looking forward rather than backward, not just to the immediate future of the farm and regional network, but to the potential of this unexpected personal connection that had emerged from blueprints shared with a stranger. By late September, The educational center at Harrington Farm was nearing completion. The renovated barn maintained its historic exterior while housing sophisticated demonstration spaces, classroom facilities, and accommodation for visiting farmers attending multi-day training sessions. The greenhouse continued to produce beyond projected capacity, providing both income and ongoing data for system refinements. The rehabilitated fields demonstrated the effectiveness of integrated trough, water management, and soil remediation techniques through healthy crops despite challenging weather conditions. Most significantly, the regional network had expanded to include 5 partner farms, each implementing adaptations of the Harrington systems appropriate to their specific conditions and crop focus. Marcus divided his time between overseeing operations at his own farm, consulting with partner sites, and developing curriculum for the educational programs scheduled to begin in November. His transition from struggling farmer to regional innovation director had progressed more smoothly than he had anticipated. Supported by both Alexandra's confidence in his capabilities and his own growing recognition of the value his practical experience brought to the broader mission, their personal relationship had evolved with similar organic progression, neither rushed nor artificially constrained, finding its natural balance alongside their professional collaboration. Alexandra now spent 4 days a week at the farm rather than 3, staying in the renovated farmhouse guest room rather than the more distant cottage. Meals were shared not just as colleagues discussing project details, but as friends and, increasingly, as partners enjoying each other's company. Weekend activities often included both farm assessments and more personal pursuits, hiking in nearby natural areas, attending local cultural events, or simply sharing quiet evenings on the farmhouse porch. Lily, home for a weekend visit from her fall semester studies, had observed these developments with evident satisfaction. "I told you this would happen," she remarked to her father as they checked irrigation settings in the western field one crisp October morning. "From that first day when you showed her your blueprints, I saw the potential professionally and personally." Marcus adjusted a sensor reading before responding. "Not everything can be predicted with the confidence of youth," he said mildly, though without denial. "Some things need time to develop naturally." "Like sustainable agriculture systems," Lily agreed with a knowing smile. "Complex, integrated, requiring the right conditions but worth the patience." Her metaphor was apt enough to make Marcus chuckle, despite his usual reticence about discussing personal matters. "Your agricultural education is serving you well beyond crop science, it seems." As they continued their inspection of the field systems, Marcus reflected on the parallel transformations that had unfolded over the past year. The revitalization of the struggling farm into a thriving demonstration site. His own evolution from isolated farmer to regional leader, and perhaps most unexpectedly, the development of a personal connection that complemented rather than competed with these professional changes. That evening, as sunset painted the sky in brilliant hues above the farm, Alexandra joined Marcus on the porch after a day of meetings with the educational center construction team. She carried 2 mugs of tea, a routine they had established for sharing observations and ideas at day's end. "The contractor confirmed we'll meet the November 1st completion date," she reported, handing him one of the mugs. "Just in time for the first scheduled workshop." Marcus nodded appreciatively. "Perfect timing. The fall harvest data from all 5 partner farms should be compiled by then. We'll have compelling evidence to share with the first group of visiting farmers." Alexandra settled into the chair beside him, close enough that their shoulders nearly touched. "The foundation director you met in Chicago called today. They've approved the grant proposal for expanding the network to 12 additional farms next year. Full funding for implementation at each site, plus expanded educational programming." This news represented a significant milestone, external validation of their approach and resources to extend its impact substantially. "That's fantastic," Marcus acknowledged, "though it will mean rethinking my time allocation. 12 new sites will require more structured coordination than I can personally provide." "Already considered," Alexandra assured him. "The grant includes funding for 2 assistant directors to work under your supervision, ideally farmers from the current partner sites who have demonstrated both technical aptitude and communication skills." Her immediate understanding of both the challenge and potential solution reflected their increasingly synchronized thinking, anticipating each other's growth, concerns, and building upon each other's ideas in a natural rhythm they had developed through months of collaboration. As twilight deepened around the farm, they discussed potential candidates from among the partner farmers, strategies for structuring the expanded network, and modifications to the educational curriculum based on feedback from preliminary sessions. The conversation flowed with practiced ease between immediate practical concerns and longer-term vision, their complementary perspectives strengthening each proposed approach. When the practical matters had been addressed, a comfortable silence settled between them, the kind of quiet contentment that had become increasingly characteristic of their evenings together. They watched fireflies rise from the fields as stars appeared overhead, natural lights above and below complementing the illuminated greenhouse in the middle distance. "I'm heading back to Chicago for quarterly board meetings next week," Alexandra said finally. 3 days of presentation and planning sessions. Marcus nodded, familiar with this regular obligation. "The training center will be ready for inspection when you return, and the initial data analysis from the Western field testing should be complete." Alexandra turned slightly to Faison, her expression suggesting something beyond these professional considerations. "I was thinking you might come with me this time. Not for the board meeting specifically, but afterward. The Chicago Symphony is performing a program I think you'd enjoy, and there's a special exhibition at the Botanical Garden featuring innovative food production systems from around the world." The invitation represented another step in their evolving relationship, a deliberate sharing of her urban world, just as she had become integrated into his rural one. "I'd like that," Marcus replied, recognizing both the personal significance and practical possibility now that the farm operations were well managed by his capable assistant. "Good," Alexandra said, with evident pleasure. "We can drive back together after the meetings conclude. I've already confirmed with Lily that she'll be home that weekend to oversee any farm issues that might arise." The detail revealed coordination beyond a casual invitation, thoughtful planning that considered both professional responsibilities and personal opportunities. It was characteristic of their relationships. Evolution. Deliberate, mutually supportive, integrating different aspects of their lives just as their professional work integrated different approaches to sustainability. As darkness settled completely over the farm, they remained on the porch, conversation shifting to more personal topics, Alexandra's early influences that had shaped her approach to sustainability, Marcus's hopes for Lily's future, and the legacy she might carry forward. Shared observations about how their lives had changed since that first seemingly chance encounter. "If you hadn't gotten lost that day," Marcus mused, "what do you think would have happened to the farm?" Alexandra considered the question seriously. "Based on the financial projections you showed me later, you might have held on another year at most. The property would likely have been sold, probably divided for development given its location." The assessment was honest, but no longer painful to hear. What had once seemed an inevitable tragedy had been transformed into a different path, not through miraculous intervention, but through collaborative innovation and shared purpose. "And what would have happened with EcoVision's demonstration project?" Marcus asked, curious about the alternative history from her perspective. "We would have selected another site, certainly," Alexandra replied, "but it wouldn't have been the same. The physical characteristics might have been similar, but the partnership." She shook her head slightly. "That was the unexpected variable that made everything else possible. Your blueprints revealed not just technical capacity, but a particular way of thinking, practical innovation, rooted in generational knowledge, but open to new approaches." She turned to face him more directly, her expression visible in the soft light spilling from the farmhouse windows. "Finding those designs was professional serendipity. Finding the person who created them?" She let the sentence hang unfinished, the implication clear in her gentle smile. Marcus reached for her hand, the gesture as natural now as their technical collaboration had become. "I'm glad you got lost on my road," he said simply. As their fingers intertwined, both gazed out over the transformed landscape of Harrington Farm, the greenhouse gleaming in the moonlight, the rehabilitated fields resting until spring planting, the educational center nearing completion on the horizon. These physical manifestations of their partnership stood as testament to what could emerge when different forms of knowledge and experience combined with mutual respect and shared purpose. But equally significant was the less visible transformation, the connection between two people who had recognized in each other complementary strengths, who had built something neither could have created alone, whose professional collaboration had laid the foundation for a personal relationship as sustainable as the systems they had designed together. The struggling farmer who had shared his blueprints with a stranger now understood that the most important design he had created wasn't drawn on paper, but lived in the partnerships he had formed with Alexandra, with the regional network of farms, with the broader agricultural community seeking resilience in a changing climate, like the integrated systems they had implemented across the farm. These connections created something greater than the sum of individual components, a legacy more meaningful and enduring than he could have imagined when Alexandra first appeared on his property, seemingly lost, but actually finding exactly what they both needed. As autumn leaves began to fall across Harrington Farm, nature's reminder of necessary change and renewal, Marcus and Alexandra continued their evening conversation, planning the future of their professional partnership and personal relationship with the same thoughtful integration that had transformed a struggling farm into a model of sustainable possibility. What had begun with blueprints shared reluctantly with a stranger had evolved into a shared vision built on mutual respect, complementary expertise, and growing affection. A design for living that honored both tradition and innovation, both practical wisdom and technical knowledge, both the land's needs and the people who cared for it. A year after their first meeting, the farm that Marcus had feared losing had instead become the cornerstone of something far greater than he could have imagined, not just a sustainable agricultural operation, but a catalyst for regional transformation. Not just a professional collaboration, but a personal connection that enriched both their lives. The blueprint for this outcome couldn't have been drawn in advance. It had emerged organically from that first encounter, developing through daily interaction, shared challenges, mutual respect, and growing trust. The future, like the rehabilitated soil of the eastern fields, was now fertile with possibility, ready to nurture whatever they chose to plant together in the seasons ahead.